Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Protector of the Fairies in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Protector of the Fairies. The Siege of Treya. Gajiel looked off the side of the boat, seeing what he assumed to be Treya coming into view. Wendy had been a big help before he got onto this boat, using her magic to removing the motion sickness he had been developing. She had done the same for Natsu, and she estimated it would last long enough for them to make it to land. Treya was far more impressive than Saika had been in his opinion. Maybe it was the proximity to the royal city, or maybe it was the actions of the rebels that had caused the changes. A large seawall stretched from the city out into the sea, and large walls joined alongside it around the city to add additional protection. The ships could land, but that didn't mean they could get past the walls even if they got to the ports. From the top of the walls he could roughly make out something on them, that something being explained to likely be cannons by nearby rebels. So we just need to somehow break through those defenses, said Gajiel, turning to one of the leaders of the assault. The commander was a large black Exceed, a strange broadsword on its back. He had thought all Exceed would have been like Happy and Carla, but this guy surprised him. Said his name was Panther Lily if he remembered correctly. That's correct. If we get past the wall, we'll win. Gajiel frowned. Don't they have troops back there or something? That's what I would do. They will. But we have superior forces here. Their greatest defense is the sea. Panther Lily glanced at the city in worry. If a knight really turns up though, it will be a problem. I will assist you as much as I can, but I fear I won't be enough. I was beaten by them once before, and they will have only gotten stronger. I'll deal with them, muttered Gajiel. I won't hold back against them if they show up. This is a time to use magic. Ah yes. You have a limited supply here, don't you? I believe that is what Miss Doggan said. Yeah. Gajiel raised an eyebrow at Panther Lily. How do you even know him anyway? You seemed very friendly with him earlier. I saved his life when he was young. I then helped raise him. He never forgot that, even if I told him that it was nothing. He's a good man when it comes to his debts. That's nice to know. I can lend him money later if he needs it without worrying about not getting it back. Panther Lily chucked at Gajiel's joke before his expression turned serious once more. You don't have to do this, you know. This isn't your world. This isn't your war. We're involved, like it or not. Gajiel scratched the back of his neck as he thought about it all. Way I see it, this is the best way we can get our friends back. I've got my own debts to pay, especially to our guild master. This isn't a simple fight. People may die in this fight. You are putting your own lives on the risk here. Gajiel laughed. Trust me, that is no different from normal from what I've heard in this guild. And it was true. The stories he had heard of people like Natsu and Urza showed they always got into trouble in missions. Half of Fairy Tail could tell you how many times they had put their life at risk, some even running out of fingers to count on. Besides, it's not like I'm not capable of killing here. Before I joined Fairy Tail, I was another guild's pet monster. I know what it takes to fight like this. Panther Lily nodded at him. If you are sure. The whole reverse anima. Would it take you back with us? Panther Lily considered the question carefully. He couldn't deny it had crossed his mind many times before. It meant he had his answer ready within a few seconds. Yes, I believe it would. Gajiel frowned. Is that okay with you? You'll be leaving your world. I do not mind. Our home was ruined long ago. Sure, we could have tried to repopulate it, but would it have truly been the same? Would you turn ruins into a town? Gajiel shook his head. No, I wouldn't. The same applies to us here. I think a fresh start is what we truly need. What I will do then, I do not know. Shagata will search for the children, but I am a soldier. I don't think I can simply go out and search for years when I do not even know the children. It may sound harsh to you, but No, I understand. Panther Lily looked at Gajiel in shock as the Dragon Slayer continued speaking. You'd likely rush to their aid if they needed it, but do they even need it? Happy and Carla turned out perfectly fine, and who is to say others didn't have that same luxury? Earthland is more peaceful right now than Edel is. You're correct on that. Then I've got a proposition for you. Gajeel smiled at the Exceed, his canines making the smile look more sinister. Join us at Fairy Tale. Be my cat. Panther Lily looked at Gajeel and blinked a few times. His head slowly turned towards the ship Wendy was on before Gajeel grabbed his head, stopping it from moving. Look all right, said Gajeel in embarrassment. I just want my own partner. Is that a problem? Panther Lily chuckled in amusement. It is not. Very well. If we both survive till the end, I will join you and become your ally. You have my word. Then let's sure we both survive then. I don't fancy looking for a new cat now that I've found such a badass one. Protector of the Fairies. Are preparations in order? Yes, Miss Kyukaku. Charge is holding at 70% and climbing. We should be ready for launch in a few minutes. Good. Kyukaku led her assistants to their jobs as she walked back over to Wendy, sitting down next to the nervous girl. First fight. What? I said, is this your first fight? Yes. I see. Not a good choice then. What was your magic best at? I'm skilled at support and healing magic. But I can dash. No. Wendy was surprised at Kyukaku's sudden harsh voice. Piercing eyes glared at her and she resisted the urge to shuffle in fear in her seat. Promise me you'll just help the others. Promise me you won't get involved yourself. But if they need my help, I can't not help. Kyukaku reached out and ruffled Wendy's hair, much to the younger girl's annoyance. So stay as support. Don't be the one who fights but support those that fight. You're too young for this, and you certainly shouldn't be anywhere near a battlefield. If it wasn't for your determination to join us then I would have locked you in a room back in Saika. I'm strong, protested Wendy. I won't be a hindrance. I don't think you will. I'm just worried for you. Kyukaku gave her a quick look, wrapping her hand against the armor she had forced the girl into. Due to the size of it she had only been able to get a breastplate for the girl, but it was enough in her eyes. It was for peace of mind so she wouldn't worry about the girl dying out there. Wendy gave Kyukaku a reassuring smile before her gaze once more went to the massive cannon on the ship. It had been drawing her gaze a lot. It wasn't anything due to magic, but rather its size. It was massive, reaching up higher than the sails of the ship and stretching across half the width of the deck. From what she had been told, the ship had been customized for carrying it, but she had yet to find out what was so special about the cannon. It's a beauty, isn't it? Wendy looked at Kyukaku in confusion. She's my baby here. Only I can fire her because everyone else messes up. I call it the Kyukaku-ho. Kyukaku-ho. Yep. Kyukaku pointed up at the cannon. It fires specially made rounds from up at the top. My favorite things to fire from it though are Raishu-akaku. Ganju's preparing one right now. Wendy turned round and spotted Ganju in the distance, talking with Natsu. She blinked a few times before she noticed what she thought was an illusion of some kind. The two were trapped in a large sphere, and it looked to be made completely of magic. Kyukaku followed her gaze and pointed at a small object in Ganju's hands. See that? That lacrima is the focus for the energy. The user must then activate the sphere and release the energy around them. Harder than it seems, especially for us here in Edalis. Ganju worked out how to get it working in the end. Imagination. He may be a fool but he's surprisingly smart. How did he describe it again? Kyukaku thought for a moment before snapping her fingers. That's it. Her hand slowly traced a circle on the ground in front of Wendy, making sure the girl was watching. Imagine a circle. That circle is the energy of the lacrima. Then chuck yourself into it. What happens if someone fails? Well, it blows up. What? Relax, it's perfectly safe with Ganju in control. That doesn't reassure me. Don't worry. You'll be perfectly safe in it. Wendy froze, looking at the woman in shock. What? Did no one tell you? This is awkward then. You're firing me, out of a cannon. Now don't worry, you'll be perfectly safe. It's a cannon. So. Kyukaku laughed at the girl's expression, pinching her cheeks. You're too cute. Look at you all afraid. Don't worry. I'm an expert at firing fireworks. Wendy's fear only seemed to grow. Don't fireworks. I don't know, explode. Well, if you do explode, I'm sure it will be a beautiful explosion. Wendy clutched her legs. I wish Carla was here. Unfortunately for her though, Carla had ended up staying behind. She couldn't blame her. She'd want to do the same if she just met her mother. Happy had joined the other Exceed too, wanting to meet them before trying to regroup with them after they took the city. A large horn blast suddenly sounded. Kyokaku shot to alert, grabbing Wendy and pulling her towards Natsu and Ganju. Ganju noticed the sound as well and shut down the energy around him and Natsu, following Kyokaku's lead towards the cannon. We'll only get one shot at this, explained Kyokaku, tapping one of the sides of the cannon to open up a doorway for them to enter through. Ganju, you know what to do, correct? Get in, bring down the walls and cannons. Yes. Do that and the rest of the fleet can safely approach. I'll support as much as I can from back here, but this is very long range, even for me. I can't guarantee the shots will be at my usual accuracy level. It should cause some confusion for you at least. Ganju gave a mock salute. Leave it to us. Kyokaku went to close the cannon before stopping suddenly, looking at Ganju in concern. Stay safe, okay? We've still got to bust Kyan out after this, and I can't do it without you. Don't worry, said Ganju seriously. I won't die. We'll all make it to the royal city in one piece. And we'll have a drink afterwards to celebrate. Kyokaku nodded before the doorway slowly shut. Inside Ganju formed the sphere while outside Kyokaku went through the final preparations of firing the Raishu Akaku. An assistant passed her a paintbrush which she used to slowly draw a circle around the cannon, making sure it was perfect. Her assistants attached seals in a ring just above the entrance and around the rest of that level, ropes breaking off from them and attaching itself to the ship. Most of the precautions here were normally unnecessary for normal firing, but the Raishu Akaku firing process was done differently, and this was the second variation of it. Drawing her sword from the stub of her right arm, she pieced the blade into the ground and began chanting. Beyond. Bronze-colored greed desires 36 degrees of control. 72 pairs of illusions. 13 pairs of horn flutes. Slowly walking forward, she pulled the bandages from her head, the bandages wrapping round her arm. The right hand of the monkey grasps the stars. The bandages burst into flames and she slammed her fist down, hitting the paint and causing it to ignite. Embraced by 25 suns, the cradle of sand will spill blood. The flames all were drawn back round to her fist before suddenly shooting forward and hitting the cannon. Kyokaku Style Version 2, Kajizaki. The flames turned to energy and shot up the cannon, the Raishu Akaku being sent flying upwards from the cannon. Kyokaku let out a sigh of relief as she saw it heading into the sky. Now she could only hope Ganju didn't mess the rest of the incantation up, else he'd lose focus on controlling the lacrima and it'd fall apart or explode. Up in the sky, Ganju held the lacrima tightly before turning to the others quickly. No one interrupt me from here on out. Incantations and chants don't do much, but it helps me focus the energy correctly. This is complicated stuff. When the two others nodded at him, Ganju looked away and towards the city in the distance. Fate of the 3 sparrows, bond of the 4 dragons, obstructing the 5 directions, return to the 6 villages. Heavenly wind, orangutan, spoon, cane of elm, 1,000 ashes, 1,000 wisdoms, the measure of white clouds, tread not on the scarlet light that embraces the moon. What the hell is that? I told you to dash. Ganju froze, not caring that he had stopped the incantation. It caused the Raishu Akaku to fall a bit and meant the sudden dragon of ice just schemed them instead of crashing into them. Who did that? Asked Wendy, her eyes scanning the city from above for the source. Sujiro Kyuzaka. Damn it, why did it have to be him? He's the perfect opposite for whatever I use. Leave him to us. Ganju nodded before using as much of his concentration as he could spare to slow their rapid descent. They were going to be slightly off their initial location, instead colliding with the wall itself. He let out a sigh, knowing what he had to do. The energy around them glowed brighter and more layers appeared around it just before they hit the wall. Instead of just colliding, they crashed straight through it all, smashing into a house on the other side. The energy broke apart around them as it came to a halt, and the lacrima shattered in Ganju's hands. He doubted he'd be able to get another like that any time soon. That had been their last one too. Wendy's head shot to the side and she called over to Natsu. He's that way. Got it. Natsu turned to Ganju quickly. You'll be alright on your own right. Who do you think you're talking to? Trust me, if I can beat them, I'll run away and shamelessly take advantage of them when they get distracted. The two quickly separated, Natsu and Wendy heading further into the town while Ganju headed back towards the wall. They had jobs to do. Protector of the Fairies. That was Hyaorin Meru, said Toshiro in shock, watching as the ice dragon flew past the Raishu Akaku before cracking and fading away. It looked exactly like the dragons he could form, the only different being in the coloring of it. His creations were always a lighter blue while these were a dark blue, almost purple in color. Sujuru has a sword with the same name as your Zanpakuto, explained Miss Dogen. He's likely the Edela's version of you. I thought as much. I met him by accident in the royal city. Toshiro frowned, his hand going to his Zanpakuto. But how can he have Hyaorin Meru? I doubt he does, or at least not like yours. Your Hyaorin Meru is a part of you, but his is simply the name of his blade. He's capable of manipulating the energy in the lacrimas in the blade to create ice. Notice how the dragon flew directly at them. He can't send it curving unless he does that from the start. It's still very limited in comparison. That's still strange. Toshiro made a step forward. I'm going to help them. You can't. They turned round to see Faust walking towards them. I know you may want to help your friends, but we need you here. Since a knight showed up, the defense of this city would have been increased beyond our estimates. I even have a suspicion that they may have some kind of weapon to control the tides. We need your help to stop those waves destroying the ships. Toshiro scowled, but he did step back to his original position. He saw the wisdom in the man's words. But what about the others? Don't worry. We have our own backup plans too. Faust stepped to the side just in time for a man to come up from below the decks. He was massive. That was the only way to describe him. Massive. He was twice the height of Miss Dogen and twice as wide too, but that wasn't due to fat. The man was pure muscle from the look of it. It showed in his steps too. He radiated power, even if he seemed slow at getting places. Most of his chest was exposed with a large piece of armor extending from his left shoulder down the arm, and he could see intense burns under the armor where cracks exposed it. The man slowly bowed his head, careful to lose his strange hat as he did so. I am ready to help. This is Jidanbui Kanzaka, explained Faust. He's the last of our commanders along with being the last of our gatekeeper unit. The others? Well, they make themselves big targets and they paid for that as a result. We all knew the risks, said Jidanbu. The sun rises in the east, and sets in the west. I am the guardian of that gate, and I won't fall so long as the sun still shines. He's also a fan of dramatics, muttered Faust, but he's a good man. If we get to the walls, he'll help Ganju bring them down. Doing so will be risky, said Miss Dogen. He had yet to see Jidanbu in combat, and so wasn't sure if it was worth the risk of getting close yet. Are you sure you can do it, Jidanbu? I can. I see. Miss Dogen turned to Toshiro. Looks like you get your wish then. We're heading forward. Miss Dogen grabbed his staves before throwing them around him, each landing at a different place on the ship. Energy fired from each one, linking together into a pentagon that spread out further to cover the whole ship. Energy then quickly spread up around them, creating a shield above them. I won't be able to keep this up forever. Get us close and let's tear down that wall for everyone else. Don't worry about dodging incoming fire. So long as you take down the wall, I'll protect us till we get there. I'll help, said Toshiro, quickly drawing his sword. You were right, it seems. He glared up as a massive wave slowly rose near the city and was sent towards them. They can control the tides. Full speed then, said Faust. We don't want to leave them with the idea that they can win after all. Protector of the Fairies. Natsu and Wendy ducked as a wave of ice flew over their heads. They had found Sujiro quickly enough. He had made his presence known very quickly when they had turned up, sending ice in all directions the moment he heard someone nearby. Dodging it had ruined any chance of a surprise attack and had led them to this predicament. "This guy's quick," muttered Natsu. They had tried to get a few attacks in at the night, but he was good at predicting their actions and was managing to either dodge them or block them with ice. It was always a strange balancing act when using fire against ice. A tug of war between the two elements. If his flames were strong enough they would melt the ice, but if the ice was cold enough it would freeze the flames. And Sujiro used very cold ice. "I can get us closer." Wendy looked at the man from their hiding place. Raising a hand, a magic seal appeared above her palm, unfortunately spreading out enough so that Sujiro spotted them. He quickly sent a dragon of ice straight at them, which Natsu quickly tried to counter with a fire dragon's roar. "O swift wind that dashes through the heavens." Vernier. A strange magical aura surrounded both Wendy and Natsu before they dodged to the side as Natsu let off his attack, the remains of the ice dragon flying past. "What is this?" asked Natsu, noticing the bubble-like aura around each of them. "I feel so much faster. It's one of my support spells. Sorry about the waste. I'm not very used to using it on others yet, so I still waste energy from the spell, hence the bigger aura we're seeing. It's good enough." Natsu shot forward, flames shooting from his feet to enhance his speed even more. Sujiro swung his sword and ice flew outwards, Natsu quickly leaping over it and closing the gap between the two. He turned flames he had used for movement into a weapon as he launched a kick at the man, the flames trying to wrap around Sujiro before the man was propelled upwards on a pillar of ice. Sky Dragon's Roar. A large blast of air shot through the sky and smashed into the ice pillar, breaking through it with ease and causing Sujiro to fall back down. Natsu leaped up as the man fell and launched a wave of flames at him from his fingers. Fire Dragon's Crushing Fang. Sujiro winced as the flames just missed him, some of his cloak being set alight, of which he quickly cut off. He returned the attack with his own, swiping down at Natsu with his sword from where he was. A dragon of ice flew from the blade's point and propelled itself through the air towards Natsu. Seeing the attack coming, Natsu quickly grabbed some of the dragon as it was about to hit him and used it to leap onto it. He quickly sprinted along the creation before leaping off at the end, getting even closer to Sujiro and blasting forward as he covered his body in flames. Fire Dragon's Sword Horn. Sujiro cried out in pain as the attack hit him, being sent flying backwards and crashing into a building. The pain was almost enough to make him lose his grip on his sword, but he managed to hold on barely. He rolled to the side as Natsu came crashing through the house, swinging at the Dragon Slayer. His blade missed, but the ice he released didn't, sending Natsu back against a wall and trapping him against it as the ice froze to the wall. The mages from Earthland hit harder than he thought they could, and he knew they had to have some way to soften blows by using magic. He wished he had that ability, but he was out of luck. All he had was his physical endurance, and that would have to be enough. O strengthen of arm to cleave the heavens. Arms. The girl. He forgot the girl. Before he could stop her though, the magic took effect. The energy that had been around Natsu and her intensified and seemed to bubble with energy as the new spell fused with the old one, and Natsu felt the increased strength immediately. With the extra strength, he summoned some flames and used the additional strength to help break free quickly. Sujiro, seeing his escape attempt, rushing towards Natsu in an attempt to stop him. Wendy rushed forward to stop him though, waving her arms around her and gathering wind to her side. Taking a page from Natsu, she used one of his own techniques that he had shown her recently and adapted it for her own element. Sky Dragon's Wing Attack. While she hadn't managed to get the hang of the attack yet, she still had more than enough power in it to knock Sujiro off guard. Instead of the sword slicing into Natsu, it was shifted to the side and cut along the wall instead. And it was in that moment when the ice holding Natsu shattered. Fire Dragon's Flame Elbow. Natsu's fist shot round as flames shot from his elbow, increasing the speed even more than Vernier was already doing. And with arms working, the power was increased much more too. Sujiro suddenly dodged at the last moment as he jumped backwards, the hilt of the sword splitting into two pieces. The longer section stayed with the sword while the shorter half came back with Sujiro, a chain between the two. As Natsu's attack missed, Sujiro rushed back forward, sliding under Natsu's arm and using the chain to tangle it up with the blade. Flames poured from Natsu's skin quickly and Sujiro was forced to make the chain slacken, Natsu's arm being withdrawn quickly. They had reached a stalemate there. Either his chains would have channeled enough ice to freeze the arm or the flames would have been hot enough to melt the ice and chain. Neither knew, and so they had to be cautious. There was a moment's break for the fighters, and then they charged back at one another, flames and wind clashing with ice as they tried to determine who was stronger. Protector of the Fairies. Ganju ducked as a large chunk of rubble went flying past his head, crashing into the ground behind him. His sister was a good shot, even at this distance. Still, her attacks weren't doing much. She was scraping off bits and pieces of the wall, but it was too strong to be destroyed unless she tried to use a more powerful shot, and that required being too close for comfort. Still, it was giving him the chaos he needed to act. The soldiers on the walls were dangerous in large numbers, but he was perfectly capable of handling them when they came at him one at a time, and most seemed too distracted by dodging the cannon fire. They weren't as immune as the wall was. Spotting a patrol up ahead, he slipped into one of the houses, thankful it seemed to be unoccupied. The streets had seemed quiet, but he had stuck to back alleys just in case. Where was everyone? Had there been an evacuation? Did that mean the king had already given up on protecting the city? Then why put up so much effort? Or was he already aware that they would get past the wall and was trying to minimize casualties? He would like to say they could fight more freely because of it, but they wouldn't be the only ones. If needed, the soldiers could fire down at the city if they invaded and not worry about casualties from civilians. And he was afraid to admit that it was a logic choice that could end up happening if he didn't sort out the wall, if they even got past the wall in the first place. He glanced outside carefully, his eyes watching the patrol as they finished rushing past. It looked like they were heading towards where Natsu and Wendy had gone. He had seen the signs of fighting in the distance. It was hard not to when fire and ice was being thrown around everywhere. It looked impressive in his opinion. He couldn't do anything like that, even with the magic tools he had. It was good that the patrol hadn't seen him though. There had been too many of them for comfort. He was sure he could take them, but not without getting a bit too flashy, and that wasn't necessary for a stealth job. Sneaking back out, he followed the road down before finally reaching the base of the wall. He ignored the temptation to whistle. It was certainly impressive up close. He could see why Kyokaku was having trouble damaging it. It was at least 3 times as thick as the walls of previous cities and it was twice as tall. It looked old too. It was reassuring to know this wasn't built just to stop them, else he'd be worried. And if the wall was as old as he thought it was, it made things just that easier. He raised a hand and placed his palm against the wall, the lacrima on the glove glowing red. He quickly moved his hand against the wall in a single spiral pattern, red light flowing behind his palm as he drew out the symbol. Seppa, he muttered, the wall around him turning to sand. It wasn't a massive area, just about as big as he was in a perfectly symmetrical shape. He sighed as he saw how deep the sand went. It looked like it only went a third of the way through with the amount of magic he had used. He glanced at his glove, roughly working out how much magic he had in it. Going by his estimates, he had enough magic to make a few large holes in the wall. This was bad. He had hoped for a much bigger impact, but he hadn't predicted the walls being so resistant. It was almost like they were. No. They couldn't be. Ganju looked at the walls again before a groan escaped his lips. It was. Damn. No wonder it was so resilient, not only to Kyokaku's attacks but his magic too. If anything, it was probably draining some of the power from anything Kyokaku fired since it was launched by magic in the first place. They would have expected this in the royal city, but not here. Sekizeki was a pain to deal with in the first place. He quickly finished pushing forward, using the spell twice more to cut through the wall and get a look outside. He would have to look for good places to open holes in since taking the whole wall down would be impossible now. He suddenly frowned as he saw the sight ahead of him. Wasn't that their flagship, if it could be called that even? The only thing that separated it from all the other ships, ignoring Kyokaku's, was the extra symbol painted onto the sails. Mistogen, Faust, Taoshiro, they were all on that ship. He saw waves rise up to strike the ship down only to get frozen by waves of ice. Cannon fire shot down at it only to hit a barrier. That had to be Mistogan's work there. But why were they moving so fast towards the wall? It didn't make sense. All the other ships were holding position, so it couldn't be to disembark yet. Was it because of Sujuru? It wouldn't help if they couldn't get everyone else past the walls. Only that ship had Mistogan on to protect it after all. And he was sure Jidanbu. He looked at the ship once more, seeing the giant of a man standing ready on it. Their eyes met for a moment, the man looking straight at him before nodding. He had spotted him. From this distance. Why had he nodded? Unless. It would be utterly foolish. It would be a risky maneuver in the first place. You would have to be insane to try it with all the cannons in place. Using a modified version of Seppa, he managed to tear off a chunk of the wall before raising up above his head, making sure the man's attention was drawn towards it. He saw the man turn towards the others, but he couldn't tell which from this distance with them all looking the same. Jidanbu turned back to him before nodding once more. So the man still wanted to go through with it? It was his choice. He could launch the spell here from where he was, but he didn't want to. Not with the risk for Jidanbu still in place. He didn't care if the man was willing to risk his life. He wouldn't let him throw it away so easily. He had a bit of time. He just had to get to the top of the wall before the ship made it shore. He quickly ran from the hole, his head peeking out from the way he had come. He needed a way up. It didn't matter how many people he had to fight. He had to find a way up. In the distance, he could see a staircase upwards. It would have to do, but it was quite far. He would have no time to waste once he made it up there. He had no time to waste now either. He sprinted towards the stairs, his luck holding as no patrols appeared to stop him. Taking the stairs two at a time, he rushed up them as quickly as he could. He was halfway up when he heard the shouts of alarm. His head turned and he saw guards gesturing at him from below, some rushing up the stairs after him. He couldn't be delayed. The staircase was likely made of sekizeki too, so he was forced to use both hands for what he wanted to do. Using the magic he had, he quickly changed parts of the stairs behind him to sand, enough to alter the path into a slope. They might still be able to follow after him, but at least he had managed to delay them somewhat, especially with all the sand to shift through. His actions also seemed to catch the attention of those ahead of him. As he neared the top, a guard appeared to stop him. He rammed into the man with as much force as he could, pushing the man back a few steps. That, unfortunately for the soldier, was right off the edge. Ganju didn't wait to listen, running back along the wall to match where the ship was coming into dock. He could see Jidanbu getting ready, and he had to make sure to help out too. More soldiers ran towards him, but he quickly reached a hand into the pouch on his back, pulling out small explosives and throwing them at them as he swiped the fuses along the grooves on his gloves. He chucked a few extras at the cannons as he passed. Every cannon he destroyed now was one less to fire when the confusion ended. Just one more. Each time he destroyed one, he aimed for one more. His time was up now. He realized that as he threw his last firework, the soldiers regrouping and rushing towards him. It was time for the big finale. He brought both hands up before tracing the symbol he used with Seppa and slammed his palms against the ground. Renkin Seppa Sen. Sand burst forth as cracks appeared in the chunk of wall he was standing on before it continued all the way down to the bottom of the wall. Ganju raised a hand and waved as he slid downwards on rubble, the soldiers shouting and pointing at him in anger. It didn't matter anymore though. He had created a gap, and now Jidanbu would do the rest. The group on the boat saw as Ganju tore a large chunk from the wall straight down to the ground. It wasn't the largest hole, and it would make it easy to be bottleneck if the men of the other side were smart enough, but it was still enough. Jidanbu stepped forward, preparing to head to the wall himself, the ship finally reaching the docks. "You better make it quick," Mistogan managed to mutter weakly, the strain of managing the barrier starting to take its toll on him mentally. "The barrier will likely only last a few minutes more at most." "That time is more than enough," said Jidanbu confidently. "No, it is unnecessary even. I will create an opening for us to storm though into." "Be careful my friend," said Faust, walking up to Jidanbu as the man knelt down. He reached into a bag he had brought with him before he brought out a strange-looking cylinder, no longer than his finger, which contained a red liquid. Faust reached up to the armor on Jidanba's shoulder before finding a small indentation that he was looking for. Handling the canister carefully, he slotted it into the armor, Jidanba thanking him for the help before stepping off the ship. Toshiro watched the man go before turning to Faust. What was that you attached to him? Would you like to know why he is called a gatekeeper? Toshiro frowned at the strange question. Why? It's because he opens gates. Can't everyone do that? Faust shook his head, looking towards Jidanba as he neared the wall. No. Not everyone. What do you do when there is no gate to open? Or what do you do when the gate is too heavy? The 4 gatekeepers were our solution to overcoming these obstacles. They would be the ones to break down the walls that stand in our path. But how? Toshiro looked back at the wall. Ganju only did so much in all the time that he had. It's that liquid, muttered Mistogen. There's something in the liquid. That's my son, said Faust proudly. You've already worked out that much with so little time. There's not much needed to guess that. But what is it? What is that liquid? Faust pointed forward. Watch. See the fruits of our labor in this war. If magic is to leave this world soon, we might as well demonstrate to you all we learned in that time. They saw Jidanba tense before he suddenly expanded before their eyes. He grew taller and taller, his muscles increasing in size till he was standing at the height of the wall itself, and they could hear the cries of fear from the soldiers up there even from this distance. Jidanba wasted no time standing there, lunging at the gap in the wall. The Sekizeki, despite trying to interfere with the magic involved with his transformation, was no match for the pure physical strength he had gained as he ripped a large chunk from the wall and threw it to the side, letting it smash against some of the cannons that were turning to fire at him. A large blast of flames burst from a cannon and shot towards him, impacting against his head. He barely felt it though, the flames dying down leaving only a slight singe of the skin. He brought one massive arm back before he swiped it along the wall as far as he could reach, swatting soldiers off like flies and crushing more of the cannons to bits. He lunged back into the cracks in the walls, his hand slowly forcing the gap wider as he ripped more and more of the wall away. Already he had widened the gap to twice its original size and he was still going. How? How is he doing that? Muttered Mistogen, almost dropping the barrier in shock. That's not possible. It's exactly like Master Makarov's magic. Your guild master, correct? He must be a powerful man to do this himself. But how? How is he doing this? Mistogen was almost begging at this point, desperate to understand what was going on. He had studied magic for years to discover a way to use it effectively, but someone from Edalis shouldn't have been able to achieve something of this magnitude without significant exposure to magic to have caused a mutation of sorts, and Jidanba would have been found by the king if that had been the case. It had been the case with all others. How do we store magic? Faust asked rhetorically. What is the method behind lacrimas? They act as containers to store what our bodies cannot, and they allow an effective way of controlling the energy that is magic. Faust glanced up at Jidanba, seeing the giant rip of another section off the wall. We began looking for other ways to do this the moment the Shiba clan was formed officially. There were simply not enough of us in the beginning, and we did not believe for a moment that we would be capable of fighting against the king's knights without some way to even the scales. They simply were too strong. And Jidanba was your answer? Faust nodded. He was one of 4 men who were capable of using such a substance that we created. If magic could be stored, why did it only have to be stored inside solid lacrimas? Was that the limit? We decided that it wasn't for the sake of a solution to our prayers. And then, by pure chance, we discovered it. Mistogen seemed to catch on. That liquid. That was magic, harnessed in a liquid form. Indeed. We managed to extract the power stored into a larsima and then transfer it into a serum. That serum was then able to be injected into a host and allowed them the power infused in the lacrima in the first instance. That has to be risky, said Toshiro, already not liking the sound of what he was hearing. All experimentation sounded wrong to him after being a test subject himself, even if it wasn't as bad as Shinji would have had it. What happened to those who tried it? They died, said Faust regretfully. They knew the risks, so don't look at me like that. We were desperate, and so were others. The chance to even the scales was enough for most to try. Faust looked back at Jidanba once more. The reason there were only 4 gatekeepers is because of that. Only those with both an iron will and incredible endurance could undertake the serum and live. Faust shook his head though, looking away from Jidanba in shame. It is not without risk still though. The serum is injected into the blood, and the transformation lasts for as long as the magic lasts. When it ends, he will be exhausted beyond all belief, and he isn't invincible right now. Simply very strong. That is why only one remains, and that is him. What's the other risk? Faust looked at Mistoggen in surprise before he chuckled sadly. You saw it again. It didn't sound enough to be worth worrying about. Indeed. Faust's look of sadness was now redirected towards Jidanbu. The magic is injected into his blood. We are not creatures capable of storing magic in our bodies, and this process is like poison to us in the end. That is why people died. And Jidanbu will be no different in the end. Even if he survives the war, his life will not be long. His lifespan was cut down to just a few years, maybe even less, as he uses the serum more and more. Eventually, he will die, and it will be sooner than it should fairly be. Then why? Protested Taushiro. Why do you continue to let him use that serum if it is so deadly? Why? Faust glared at the boy. Tell me, would you refuse power if it meant you could no longer save people? Jidanbu can stop using it whenever he wants. All he has to do is ask, and he knows that. He continues along this path because he has already decided to give up his life, and for us to not listen to his wishes would be nothing more than disrespectful after his sacrifice. So we will let him keep fighting like this so that he will not have lost those years for nothing. Taushiro scowled, but he didn't argue any further, Faust looking back at Jidanbu as the giant ripped off the last part of the wall necessary for what they needed. The gap was now 5 times larger than before, and it was more than enough now with all the cannons gone. Sound the call. Send everything forward. We move in to take Treya. Protector of the fairies. Sujiro couldn't help but stare in amazement at Jidanbu in the distance. Incredible. I didn't think any of the gatekeepers were still left. And the strongest of them all to boot. Simple incredible. Natsu rushed in while he was distracted, launching a fist of flames at his head that Sujiro narrowly dodged. Can't you let a man enjoy looking at interesting things without interrupting him? Not when he's my enemy. Smart. Rude, but smart. Sujiro swiped down and back up in rapid succession, 2 dragons of ice flying from his blade and intercepting as they hit Natsu. The ice threatened to freeze Natsu before he burned the parts holding him in place away, escaping before any more of the ice touched him. As he fled from the rest of the attack though, Sujiro intercepting him. Luckily the spell Wendy had cast was still in effect, allowing him to dodge the man's sword strike with ease before striking back with his own attack. Sujiro's sword came back round and blocked the flames he sent flying forward, thin layers of ice appearing to take the brunt of the fire. He didn't expect Wendy to suddenly jump up behind him, air being drawn into her lungs. Sky Dragon's roar. Sujiro quickly flipped upwards, the air narrowing, missing him. Natsu took the opportunity to launch his own breathe attack and, while he avoided it too, he didn't escape completely, flames singeing his left arm from the contact. The moment his feet hit the floor, he struck out, his sword slicing to the side. Natsu took a step back on instinct, the spears of ice that generated from the ground between the two of them hitting his side instead of his heart. He winced in pain as he jumped further back, flames bursting to life around the wound and burning it shut so he didn't bleed out from it. He could always have Wendy check it out later. His moving back however left Wendy unprotected, Sujiro seeing that and moving towards the girl. He quickly crushed his inhibitions against striking her, choosing to forget she was simply a child here. She was an enemy, and had to be treated as one no matter what he would morally do. And if he took her down, he was sure that the spells she had used to enhance Natsu's abilities would fade. Wendy tried to step back as Sujiro rushed at her, but she missed the rubble behind her and tripped. Sujiro's blade slashed down at her and she desperately tried to summon the wind around her to help shield her. In the end it wasn't needed. Sujiro's blade came down and clashed against another blade, a large black cat standing in his path. Sujiro. Sujiro scowled as he recognized the exceed in front of him. Panther Lily. You remember my name. That's nice to know that you remembered such a weakling like myself. Sujiro sneered. If you're so weak, then why did you show up before me alone? Who said I'm alone? Hi. Sujiro dodged at the last moment, a buzzsaw-like blade slashing where he had been. Only then as he saw his attacker did he realize that it wasn't a normal weapon and instead was a part of the man's arm. He backed away in shock for a moment before his mind snapped him out of his daze. We meet again, Gajeel? Hi. So we do. The buzzsaw burst to life, Gajeel holding it up menacingly. Let's have some fun, why don't we? I'm afraid there isn't much time for fun right now. Gajeel glanced to the side to see Toshiro appearing before them, standing in the air with his sword drawn. We need to finish him off now before he can delay us any longer. The others need us. You're that kid, muttered Sujiro before he noticed the sword in Toshiro's hands. Wait, that's... You can't be. You're the Earthland version of me? I'm a pipsqueak. Laugh all you want. You're outnumbered here. Sujiro couldn't help but laugh at that. Outnumbered? You think this registers as that? I fought alongside 6 others against an army. No, that was being outnumbered. But this? There is only 5 of you here. We're not any normal 5 though, stated Gajeel. Yeah, added Natsu. And in case you forgot, I gave you enough trouble already with Wendy's help. You think you can beat 5 of us? It's not a matter of can or cannot, muttered Sujiro. It's just one simply fact that drives me here. I have to win. Without any warning, Sujiro rushed at them recklessly. Gajeel brought up his arm just in time to block the blow, but his eyes widened in shock as he saw the blade slowly start to dig into the metal, despite how fast the edge of his arm was moving it. He pulled himself back quickly, his arm shedding the metal just in time as it cut through the rest of it. Toshiro leaped in as Gajeel fell back, Panther Lily joining him in the assault as the two swung their own blades at him. Sujiro rapidly brought his own back round and managed to catch the 2 blades against his own, struggling to hold them back. His feet skidded along the ground as they forced him back and straight into the firing line of Wendy's breath attack, sending him flying against a wall. He pushed himself off it and took a step forward when Natsu surprised him from above, flames in both hands as he joined them together. Fire Dragon's brilliant flame! Sujiro screamed as the flames collided with him, rolling out of them with one hand clutching his face in pain. He struggled to stand before falling over, his sword doing little to support him. You're coming with us, said Toshiro as he walked forward towards the man. And just as he was about to reach him, Toshiro vanished, breaking down into nothing more than specks of light. No one said anything for a moment, completely in shock at what they had just seen until a female voice cut through the air. Surprise! Protector of the Fairies. The King of Edelas walked down the last of the stairs, entering the dungeon of the tower. It was been built at the lowest level of the tower, buried beneath the ground to contain those too dangerous to let loose, whether it was due to their strength or due to what they knew. Most of the cells were empty though except for 2, and he only cared for one of the occupants. Yo, Mr. King. What you doing down here? The king ignored the voice and instead walked past the cell the voice had come from. Hey, I'm speaking here. I heard, the king called back joyfully. Now be a good girl and be quiet, else your meals might get misplaced for a week. He heard some vague whispered insults in the background, but he pretended he hadn't heard them, instead getting to the target of his visit. A seat was already placed outside the cell and he quickly took the opportunity to claim it for himself. The cell in front of him wasn't like any of the others. The bars would have been broken long ago if they had been. Instead it was a product of his own power. The bars were a pure light blue, made of magic itself to hold the prisoner inside it at bay. He stared into the cell, seeing the scruffy appearance of the man within. You still haven't bothered to shave, he commented on casually. And here I went through all the trouble to get you that razor. It even has a lacrima in it for extra power. Keeping my appearance in check isn't exactly my biggest concern. The prisoner raised his hands, revealing a pair of stone bracelets around his wrists with a long chain connected between the two. Besides, have you seen a prisoner who worries about their appearance? Isn't this just because you broke the razor? He grinned as he saw the man flinch. Ah, it is. You are resilient, I will give you that. And how did the blade fare against these bars? As well as the previous attempts. The man scowled, looking in a way as the king leaned closer to the bars. You never give up, do you? I've already given you plenty of clues to breaking out of here, but you just can't work it out. The king sighed and poked one of the bars, watching it bend to his will before snapping back into place. And why the hell would you give me advice to escape? You are my brother, the king muttered. I've got a duty as the eldest to pass on what I know to the youngest. I don't like keeping you here anyway. I'd rather have you transferred to somewhere else in the palace, but you would escape the first chance you got, and I quite like being able to visit you whenever I want. So you're a king with a brother complex. The king didn't even turn towards the female voice. One day without food. And I'm being lenient because my brother likes your company. So worth it. Besides, Kyan will share some food with me. You will, won't you? Of course, Kyan called back. Because my brother won't refuse me food, will he? You got me there. The king sighed, leaning back against his chair. At least you will have some company soon. It seems your little Sheba group will be moving to attack me here soon enough. I doubt the defenses at Treya will have been enough. Still, at least you will get some new cellmates to talk to. There are some very interesting ones coming to visit. They can even use magic naturally. The king smirked as he saw Kyan's eyes widen. You know who they are, don't you? You gave me everything I needed to work it out as well. If it wasn't for you, they wouldn't be here in the first place. I wouldn't be here in the first place if it wasn't for me. Now don't be so hard on yourself. How could you have known? The king slowly got to his feet, looking disappointed he had to leave. I'll be back soon enough, brother. Pretty soon this rebellion will be over, and we'll have all the time in the world to talk. Maybe then you will stop trying to escape if I crush your reason to. If you harm one hair on their heads, I'll dash. You'll what? What do you think you can do? You've been trapped behind these bars for 6 months. Until you learn what it is I'm trying to teach you, you'll never escape. The king left the cells behind, leaving the sole 2 occupants in silence. A female voice finally broke the silence, speaking in amusement. So, attempt number 726 was it? Protector of the Fairies. A name and a face. The group turned in shock as the light that was where Toshiro had been was sucked towards the girl, being drawn into a strange gun. The girl smirked at them as she lifted the gun up, examining the small Larsima that could be seen poking out of the weapon. Brushing one of her pink pigtails out of her way, she smiled at them, doing her best to act like she hadn't just stolen one of their friends. Hey, what's up? Why would they fall for that, said the girl's companion, her green hair contrasting greatly to the pink-haired girl's own. They just saw you take that guy. So what, who cares about small little details? Her companion observed the group carefully. I think they do. Who the hell dash? Natsu's attempt at speaking suddenly got cut off as Sujiro struggled to his feet, looking at the 2 girls that had arrived in a mix of shock and annoyance. What are you 2 doing here? I can handle this myself. Sure you can, old buddy, said the pink-haired girl, looping an arm over the man's shoulders. She quickly used her grip to throw the guy back down to the ground before kicking him for good measure. That's for losing. What do you think, Nozomi? Enough punishment. That is not up for us to decide, answered Nozomi. You go too far sometimes, Ryrika. So it is you 2, stated Panther Lily, taking a step forward with his sword raised. Ryrika de Kugamine, the collector, and Nozomi Kyujou, the thief. We have nicknames. Ryrika glanced at Nozomi in annoyance. Why did no one tell me? And why am I the collector? That isn't nearly cute enough for me. Maybe it's because you take whatever you find cute. I thought thief would have suited you better than it would me. Says the thief. What did you do to Toshiro? Asked Gajeel, his arm transforming back to a saw. We aren't afraid to hit girls here. Oh? This guy isn't cute at all. No chivalry or respect. Can we just kill him? The king said he wants them alive. They are certainly more valuable that way in the first place. Ryrika puffed out her checks, looking away in annoyance. Fine, but do we have to take him too? Ryrika. I know. Ryrika raised the gun suddenly and shot at Wendy, Natsu diving in the way as a strange blast of pink energy shot forth. Nothing happened though, and Natsu looked around confused for a moment. Was that dash? Ryrika snapped her fingers and Natsu broke into specks of light just like Toshiro had, quickly being sucked into the gun's lacrima. The others immediately were on guard, moving away from her and watching her actions carefully. Gajeel and Wendy quickly both breathed in before both launched a breath attack at the girls, Ryrika looking annoyed at the large attack as it approached. Tag, she muttered to Nozomi, letting the other girl take the lead. You're in. As the attack was about to collide, a sword flashed into Nozomi's hands and she slashed at the attack, the energy behind it vanishing as she swung till it was nothing more than harmless wind. Nozomi quickly swung once more, a large blast of pink energy being released from the blade like a beam. Seeing the attack coming, Panther Lily and Gajeel jumped forward with their own swords, slashing together to try and break the blast. They managed to slow it down before finally redirecting it upwards, but they noticed something crucial straight away afterwards. Ryrika was gone. Got you. Gajeel and Panther Lily rapidly turned, rushing towards Ryrika before she pulled the trigger. It was too late however, but they weren't her target as Wendy suddenly vanished like the others before her. The two didn't stop like she had hoped they would have though, and Ryrika was forced into dodging a flurry of attacks, a few scratching her as the blades missed her by mere hair widths. Nozomi appeared by her side as they tried to finish her off, her blade clashing against their own. Ryrika aimed her gun but the others suddenly backed away from it, dodging the beam as it shot past them. Gajeel stuck his hand into the ground and iron poles shot out under Nozomi and Ryrika, causing the girls to flee from their area. Nozomi however chose to flee forward, slashing at Gajeel. He brought up an iron club to defend with only to be shocked as his transformation began to waver and fade. He barely got his arm back when the transformation broke apart. The distraction was all that was needed for Ryrika to suddenly shoot him, giving him a wave for good measure. Goodbye. Just as Gajeel felt his body changing, 5 staves landed around him, energy surging between them and forming a ring around him. To his shock, and the girls too, he didn't vanish like the others. Wow, that's a nifty trick there, stated Miss Doggin, standing above them on the rubble of one of the buildings damaged in Natsu's fight. I've never seen something like that before, even in Earthland. Miss Doggin, muttered Nozomi in annoyance. Why should we not be surprised? I guess Treya is well and truly lost if you've turned up now. We're mopping up the remains of resistance. Miss Doggin looked around, carefully noticing Natsu and the others were gone. The better question is where my friends are. Ryrika held up her gun boastfully. Right here. They weren't an issue to deal with. Miss Doggin flicked his wrist, his staves around Gajeel moving subtly. Ryrika saw it though and tooted, shaking her head. Don't do that. She pointed at her gun before gesturing at Gajeel. Take your pick. Launch something at me and you may stop me. But I'll absorb him into this the moment you release him here. That blast of yours has a timer. It won't stay on him forever. Of course it won't. It has about. Ryrika looked at Nozomi in confusion. How long was it again? It's your ability. Come on, you know stuff about everyone's abilities. What was it again? Nozomi sighed. 5 minutes. Thank you. That wasn't so hard was it? Ryrika turned her attention back to Miss Doggin, giving him a wave. We can't stay and chat though. We've got somewhere to be. The king calls. Don't let them go, said Gajeel in determination. Stop them now. Miss Doggin shook his head. We can't take them on right now. He turned his attention back to Ryrika and Nozomi. Leave. Now. Sure thing. Ryrika grabbed Sujiro before linking hands with Nozomi. See ya. The group vanished in a burst of light similar to how the others had vanished before, the light flying off into the distance before any of them could spot a proper direction. Are you sure that was wise? Asked Panther Lily. We may have been able to take them. Not right now, muttered Miss Doggin. 2 knights plus 1 injured one who would still try and fight. I don't want that kind of fight right now. So we abandon them. Mistogan shook his head at Gajil's question. No. They have provided us with a decent opportunity anyway. Oh really? And what, pray tell, is that? A chance to break Kyan out. Protector of the Fairies. Ryrika and Nozomi appeared back in a strange lab, Sujuru immediately being dropped to the floor as Nozomi walked over to a desk and sat down while Ryrika simply abandoned him. A bit of help, Sujuru muttered weakly, Ryrika sighing before walking to the door and opening it wide to shout out of. Injured over here. Come and get him. Ryrika smiled, turning back to Sujuru. There you go. Hey Nozomi, I'll take these guys to the king. Here. Nozomi chucked 3 large pieces of stone at her, 2 holes in each for hands to fit through while a small lacrima rested in the middle. Ryrika barely caught all 3 before complaining. Man, these things are heavy. Can't I get someone to carry them already? Go. Fine, I'm going already. See ya later. Ryrika left the 2 other knights behind, heading to the throne room. A few medical staff bowed at her as she passed before rushing to the lab she had come from. Seems they were getting faster at responding to her whims. Reaching the throne room required navigating around 3 floors, making her wish she could use her ability to head straight there. Unfortunately it didn't work like that. She had been able to force the others to return to the lab with her from Treya because of a lot of experimentation, a localized energy field, and an area in there that she deemed very cute. It wasn't exactly something they could replicate elsewhere without far more effort than she wanted to spend. She knocked on the throne room's doors as she arrived, hearing an enter immediately. She couldn't resist giving the door a kick to open it, enjoying the look of annoyance she saw on the Senna's face. Shuakura was by the king's other side, seeming bored at that moment in time. He must have finished his book already. She made her way to the throne before bowing, holding up the gun for her king to take. It is done. I see. The king took the gun and held it up in interest. It certainly must have been a surprise for them when you and Nozomi showed up. How is Sujuru by the way? Beaten. He'll probably be in the hospital getting those burns looked over. That is unfortunate. I will have to pay him a visit later. The king raised the gun and pointed it at the ground beside Ryrika. You have set it up for reassembly. Yep. Got the cuffs here too. Good. With that the king pulled the trigger, 3 bursts of light flying out and reassembling into people. Before they could move, they had the stone cuffs forced onto their hands, the lacrima in the cuffs glowing as it locked their hands in place. Ryrika held one of the 3 to the floor and Senna and Shuakura did the same with the others, making it look like the mages were bowing to the king. The king examined each person in turn before clapping once. Leave us. Senna looked at the king anxiously. Master. Don't worry about me. They are no threat to me. Now leave. The 3 knights bowed before retreating from the room, leaving the king alone with the 3 mages. The king slowly stepped from his throne and began walking down to the mages, amusement in his voice as he spoke. You can't break free from those shackles. He pressed Natsu's head back to the ground as the dragon slayer tried to look up, making Natsu glare deeply into the stone. It's an interesting substance, this stone. Expose rocks to enough magic and they learn to reject it. That is what we call sekizeki. No matter how much you try, you can't break out of these things since it seals your magic away. You can't be, muttered Taoshiro in shock, his eyes glancing upwards and seeing a bright mop of orange hair. It's impossible. What is? Me being here? Ah Taoshiro, you are so naive. Ichigo. Natsu's head shot up as Wendy's did, his eyes sparkling. So you are alive. Let us out of here. Wait, said Taoshiro urgently. How do we know he's our Ichigo? Wendy. He has to be, said Wendy happily. It's the same, even in this world. Magic loves him here. Good. The king clapped his hands. Now that we have that out of the way dash. Not yet. Taoshiro glared at the king in defiance. I won't believe it yet. What is the name of my Zanpakuto? Hyorin Meru. Who was your first friend? Laxus. What's your name? Come on Taoshiro. Surely you haven't forgotten my name already. Your name. Taoshiro refused to let the question go, the king sighing in defeat. Fine then. Ichigo dash. Enough. Toshiro leveled as much hate as he could into the stare he was giving the king. You aren't Ichigo. You're the Edala's version of him. But Toshiro dash. No Wendy. Toshiro kept up his glare, Ichigo smirking at him in return. Ichigo never told me his last name, so why would he be prepared to say it as if I knew it? He never told you lot. Ichigo laughed in amusement. I wonder what was going through his head with that. You don't even know our surname? How pathetic. The king turned his back on them, calling to the people outside. I've had enough of talking to these people. They aren't as worthy as I thought they were. Send them to the cells. My brother should at least get to keep them as guests. Natsu tried to protest as he was dragged off with the others, but he found the king had been right. His magic wasn't responding to him, and it made him feel strange. He felt strangely weak. Was this what everyone felt like who didn't have magic? They couldn't do much as they were dragged further and further down, ending up in the cells below the tower. Natsu struggled once more before being thrown roughly against the back of the cell walls before Toshiro and Wendy were shoved in after him. The door slammed shut and the guards retreated off, ignoring Natsu's calls of revenge. Great, stated Natsu, crossing his arms. What the hell do we do now? Who were those chicks anyway? I don't know, said Wendy, the cuffs restricting her from scratching the back of her neck. I thought they were strange though. Strange? In what way? Well. Wendy paused to think. Perhaps. I think they were a lot like the anima. Humans with the same reading as the anima. Toshiro shook his head. That can't be possible, can it? I don't know. I just see what I see. It wasn't as dense as the actual anima. It was weaker, perhaps just from long exposure. Who you talking about? The group froze as they heard a voice coming from the cell opposite theirs. Natsu in particular was frozen in shock. Slowly a girl appeared by the bars, her hair as white as Toshiro's. Nozomi and Ririka. Yeah, said Toshiro, not realizing the panic Natsu was feeling. He knew it wasn't her. It couldn't be. Their listener was dead. It was impossible for her to still be alive. This had to be the Edala's version. Without knowing, he had taken steps to the bars, getting as close as he could. He couldn't help it. He wanted it to be her so much. The girl's eyes shot to him as he came into view and he saw recognition on her face. It was almost vanishing until her eyes left his face, spotting his scarf around his neck. The largest smile she had ever had appeared on her face, her hands reaching out in an attempt to grab Natsu. It's you, isn't it? She muttered in happiness, Natsu in shock as he realized what she meant. It's my Natsu. Listen. Protector of the fairies. Gajeel smashed his fist down on the table in rage, ignoring the protests of the people near him. He was just so angry. What are we going to do? He asked seriously, his voice low and deadly. You let them leave so we could use some kind of plan to break them out later. So what are we going to do? Miss Doggin sighed. Ideally? I'd rather like them to be able to break out themselves, but they won't, I think. They were taken alive, and that implies there is a method of some kind of containing them. We switch to plan B then, said Faust, grabbing maps of the royal city and spreading them along the table. We will need to rescue them ourselves. Are you serious? Kyokaku slammed a fist against the table. If it was that easy, then we would have done so already. Kyan has been there for 6 months and not one attempt to free him worked, and their security was never this high. We lost an excellent field agent in trying to save him, and she had one of the highest chances of success. There is always a way. Miss Doggin studied the maps carefully, looking for a way to appear to him. No defense is perfect. There is always a flaw, whether it is magical or not. And in this case, I doubt a magical defense is in place until we actually get there. Human error then, stated Faust. People make mistakes and then do so more often than you will think. Any forces in the city will be on alert too, and, after enough time and no danger, they will grow sloppy. There are the tunnels. Ganju quickly grabbed a new map, this one more roughly sketched than the others. I remember it from my youth. I would go exploring down there for fun, and few people know all the tunnels down in that place. That is not wise, said Jidanbu. I have heard the rumors of that place, and it is not a safe path we can take. There are said to be things down there. Noises. Unnatural ones. It's nothing more than superstition. Tell me, as a kid, did you ever venture in too deep? Ganju dropped his head in defeat. I did not. You see. I remember what happened once in stories. A child wandered too far into it and vanished, never being seen from again. A story at night to frighten kids, I'll agree on that, but all stories have some basis of truth in them. We must find another way. There is none. Kyukaku screamed at them. We have looked and looked and looked, and there is nothing. The only way we can free them is to break them out during the battle. Then how do we win? Faust slammed his staff against the ground. We are not unstoppable to them. We didn't need as many as we sent against Sujiro to win, but we sent that many to be sure of it. And there are 5 more knights out there. We can't match them one-on-one with what we have left. What about from above? Panther Lily pointed at some of the nearby islands. Surely they would not expect an air assault to break them out. Too close to the king, muttered Jidanbu. We don't want to end up anywhere near him if we want to succeed. Ganja went to speak but stopped, realizing something the others had missed. He caught Mistogan's eye and silently signaled the man as he flicked his eyes to where Gajeel had been. He then glanced at the table, making sure Mistogan saw what was gone. Without a word, Mistogan left the room, the others looking after him in shock. Where is he going? Either to stop someone doing something foolish, or to help them succeed with it. Protector of the fairies. Where is it? You looking for something? Gajeel froze, slowly turning to see Mistogan standing behind him. I know what you are going to say. You heard what Jidanbu said, didn't you? I know. Gajeel clenched his fists in frustration. But what else can I do? I can't just stand here and wait, hoping everything will turn out okay. I don't care if that place is dangerous. I'm risking it. Mistogan sighed. I thought so. So then, what now? Gajeel tensed, ready to fight back if needed. They both stared at one another, waiting for either to make a first move. Finally, Mistogan reached backwards, his hand going to his pocket. He pulled something out before suddenly throwing it at Gajeel, the man grabbing it midair. Here. Gajeel glanced at the object in his hands. These are keys. You were looking for transport, right? Gajeel nodded. Then we'll take mine. It's faster that way. We'll. Gajeel suddenly realized what Mistogan was saying. No, I can't ask you to risk your life too. Well then, it's a good thing you're not asking. If I can't persuade you to stop, I'm going to have to follow after you and make sure you're okay. Gajeel looked at the keys before turning his head back to face Mistogan. Thanks. Don't mention it. Mistogan grabbed Gajeel by the shoulder and dragged him towards one of the many vehicles parked in the small garage. This is mine, he said, pointing towards a small 2-person vehicle. Not very fancy or big compared to others, but I'm new in comparison, and I can teleport if given enough time to set it up. This helps me get around when needed. Gajeel opened the door before taking a seat in the car, taking the driver's seat. You'll give direction? Sure. We better go. It will take us at least a few hours travel to get there from where we are. Gajeel turned the keys, the motor revving as the car burst to life. What about the others? The rest of our forces are assembling and preparing to mobilize. They were already assembled, ready, and should be arriving as we speak. We need to take advantage of our momentum. The attack takes place in 4 days, including travel time. So we need to get them out before shit hits the fan. Exactly. We better get moving. We don't have time to waste. Protector of the fairies. How are you alive? Listener chuckled at Natsu's question. I figured that would be the first question you would ask me if we ever met again. Do you two know each other? Listener looked at Wendy happily. Yep. I'm his wife. Natsu blushed red. You're still saying that stuff from when we were kids. You aren't denying it, Listener pointed out, making Natsu blush even more. So you are from Earthland to them, stated Toshiro. From Fairy Tail? Yep. Are you a new member? I don't think I remember you, but then it has been 2 years. My memory could always be a bit off. No, I'm new. Joined when I returned with Ichigo. He came back? When? Is the master still mad at him for leaving on that quest? I bet Laxus and Levi were happy. Laxus always seemed to be sulking whenever I saw him, but maybe that is how I interpreted it. Listen, said Natsu. A lot of things have changed. Laxus isn't in the guild anymore. Listena's eyes widened. Really? What happened? When? When Ichigo returned recently. Laxus had launched an attack on the guild in an attempt to take it over. He lost, and was kicked out of the guild. I see. What? What else did I miss? Well, Phantom Lord attacked us, but we won, so don't worry there. Destroyed our guild hall, but we rebuilt it better than ever. And Myra? Elfman? How are they doing? They're doing fine. Natsu chuckled. It's going to be a surprise when we all get back. We ended up leaving on the day you died. I think they will like this surprise when they get back. I can't wait, Listener muttered quietly, Natsu hearing the anticipation in her voice. So much that I've missed. I don't want to miss even another second. I don't mean to interrupt, said Toshiro, but Natsu just said you were dead. How does that work? Why does everyone think you are dead? Surely they would think you were missing if you are here. There was a mission I went on with my brother and sister, explained Listener. Elfman tried to take over this beast with his magic. It failed, and the beast regained control. But he was still Elfman. We were afraid to harm him, and so Myra couldn't fight him seriously. Listener shook her head. It all went to hell. Myra's a demon takeover specialist. They aren't very powerful if you hold back their strength, because their strength is part of why they are so powerful. So I tried to reason with Elfman. I was sure my voice would reach him and that we could all go home together. But something happened. Listener nodded at Toshiro's words. Yes, something happened. Elfman didn't respond to me, and the beast swatted me away like a fly. I heard all over when Myra found me, Elfman by her side crying with her. I think hitting me must have snapped something in him, and he looked so broken too. He's alright, isn't he? He's fine, said Natsu, noticing her concern. Myra's a bit quieter than before, but she's slowly regaining some of her old self. Elfman finally mastered a full body takeover, by the way. Really? Listener clapped her hands in excitement. That's great. I'm so happy for him. He was always jealous of me and Myra, and I know he was upset about not being able to do it. Natsu fiddled with his scarf awkwardly. Myra and Elfman said they saw you die. They saw someone die, but it wasn't me. Listener leaned back, sighing. I closed my eyes and, when I opened them, I was in Daedalus. I thought it was an afterlife for a moment until I started looking around. And then I found them. Fairy Tail. We met them, said Wendy. They were different. Yeah, they are. Listener sighed again. I learned there that the real Listener had died for them. They almost believed I was theirs until Laxus corrected them. He realized I was an Earthland mage from the moment he saw me. It wasn't till later than I found out why. I thought Fairy Tail was similar to our guild, and it was to begin with. But they have loyalty to the king. They told him of me, and I was taken to him. It was a surprise seeing who he was. You mean Ichigo? Yeah. I did not expect to find the Daedalus version of Ichigo to be him. None of us did, said Toshiro. He would have fooled most people if he truly wanted, but he couldn't answer all the questions I gave him correctly. He seemed amused even when we worked it out so quickly. Did Ichigo come with you? Yeah. But we don't know where he is right now. I see. I can see why you almost believed it was the real him then. I only knew it wasn't because I was all alone in Daedalus. He was kind to me to start with, curious of Earthland. Yet he seemed so knowledgeable about it too. The things he asked were more personal stuff, like what was it like to have magic inside us and what was Fairy Tail like there. He seemed more curious in the differences in worlds mostly. He sounds almost nice there. Was this before the Shibas appeared? You know about the Shibas? Is Miss Kyukaku okay? The others looked at her in shock. Miss Kyukaku. Listener blushed. It's what a lot of us rebels called her. Hold on, said Toshiro. You were a rebel? How did that end up happening? I escaped one night from here. I snuck out and ran. He let me, I think, as if I already had given him everything he wanted. I had been held there for a year, and at that time the Shiba clan had been growing slowly and getting a bit of attention. I ended up running into them and one thing led to another and I ended up involved. I was one of Miss Kyukaku's helpers. And yet you ended up back here. Listener looked down sadly. Yeah. 6 months ago our leader, Kyan, was captured. I was one of our best infiltrators and so I was assigned to get him out. We heard of him. I guess you weren't able to rescue him. Listener shook her head. I wasn't. I ended up getting locked up with him. And I've been here ever since. 6 months of almost pure boredom. Only fun time is when the king comes down to talk to Kyan. I try and mess with him. He talks to Kyan. Asked Natsu. Why? Listener gave him a shrug. I don't know. He calls him brother and, while Kyan uses it a bit sarcastically in return, he still uses the name for the king as well. To be honest, I don't get what they do half the time. They just talk and the king keeps talking about progress or something like that. They talk strangely civil though. More than prisoner and king should, which makes me think they might really be brothers. That would explain why the king himself went to capture Kyan, said Toshiro. Family deals with family type of situation maybe. Toshiro quickly turned to Wendy. Why were you so sure to start with that the king was our Ichigo? He looked the same. Looked. Listener laughed. He's still got the same appearance, remember? Wendy scowled as she was laughed at. Not like that. The way magic responded to him. It was the same. Listener glanced at Natsu for help only for him to shrug. He didn't understand it completely either, even after hearing an explanation of her sight from her a few days ago. There was something strange though, muttered Wendy. It was the same, and yet it was stronger. More powerful maybe. I think I might have mistaken it for internal magic originally because of that, hence why I believed it was him. Thinking back now, it was all the magic around him, not within. He is like that, said Listener. You haven't seen him properly. In fact They froze as sudden energy flowed past them, quickly turning to the source of it. Wendy let out a gasp as the king walked past, seeing the intense magic around him clearer than she had before. The king had to have suppressed it before because it was flowing much more intensely than it had previously, surrounding him in an almost protective shield while reaching out around him to scout ahead. He ignored them however, walking to a cell at the end. A cell with bright blue bars of magic. Wendy tried to hide her shock even more as she saw the bars. She could see nothing but magic there, and no source to hold it in place. It just existed there, and it seemed to become more excited as the king got closer. Was this a product of the king's power? How was that possible? Come on, said the king. We're going for a walk. I don't really want to chat with so many unwanted eavesdroppers. The center bars of the cell slowly moved to the side, creating an opening for someone to walk through. They heard footsteps as a figure pushed himself out of the gap, his hands chained back stone bracelets around his wrists. He was cloaked in what looked to be the remains of a torn coat, cuts and dirt all over it, and it looked like it had been worn for a long time now. The king led the person back past them, his head covered by a hood from the cloak. It looked like it had once been black, but a lot of dried mud and dirt covered it now, and she was sure she recognized the faint symbol on the back. The others looked at the person in interest, watching him leave with the king before Listener broke the silence. And that there was Kyan. Still can't believe he didn't even bother saying hello. Wendy could only shake her head, but no one seemed to notice. That wasn't Kyan. It couldn't be. Because she had only seen 2 people so far that had magic reacting to them in such a way, and they both had shared the same face. She didn't see the man's face, and no magic seemed to be leaking from the man, but it had to be him. This was why they hadn't found Ichigo. Because he was already here. Kyan was Ichigo. Protector of the fairies. I'm Kyan, not Ichigo. So how do you like your new cellmates? They're loud, muttered Kyan, rubbing some sleep from his eyes. I was tired and I didn't expect you to have them brought here so quickly. You've slept through louder noises. I think you're excited. Excited? Kyan shook his head. About what? You brought some random people and you think that will make me happy. Do we have to play this game right now? Where you are Kyan and I pretend as such and call you by that name. Since when have you ever called me by that name? You only seem to call me brother. Kyan is such a boring name. Ichigo suits you a lot more. Well, that's your name too. We need some way for people to tell us apart. Ichigo raised a hand, knocking the hood off Kyan's head. Is that why you dyed your hair? I don't see what is so wrong with orange. At least most it has faded. I'm glad I confiscated those tools from you. I didn't expect so many to be devoted simply for a disguise. Kyan scowled, leaning back against the chair he was sitting in. His brother had taken him through half the tower till they got here. He guessed this was so they could have some privacy as they eat, and it was rare he was taken from his cell to eat. Normally food was just delivered to him. There was always this awkward silence when they were eating until Ichigo said something to break it, acting like he wasn't keeping him held here. If his memory served, he hadn't been in this room for a few months now. It must have been Ichigo's birthday back then, and his as a result too. He wanted to chuck his present away but he hadn't found the strength to do so. He didn't know if this version of him was religious or not, but he accepted the cross regardless, and it still hung from his left wrist right now. Every so often he heard the sound of his chains hitting one another, making it annoying as he ate. There was nothing he could do about them though. Ichigo had specifically designed them for him, making sure he wouldn't be able to use the magic he had left to break free. It wasn't like he had massive amounts left anyway. He had been around in Edalas for a year before he had finally been caught, and he had expended most of what he had by this point, leaving him with about a fourth of his total supply. That was still a lot considering, but still much less than he was used to. How do you think they will try and rescue your friends? Kyan froze, the fork halfway to his mouth. I'm not sure. He took a bit of what he had been trying to eat before scowling. You like your traps here? If they can break in, then they can have them. Ichigo laughed. Think of it as a reward. A few prisoners leaving isn't much of a threat. But I leaving would be. Yes, I won't deny that. But they can't break your cell. I've made sure of that. Are you sure you aren't underestimating Earthland mages? Are you sure you aren't overestimating them? Kyan sighed, placing the fork down on his plate. And the upcoming fight? Let them come. They will be crushed. I am confident in my knights. And I'm confident in my Shibas. Ah yes, your little clan. Jidanbu is certainly a worthy opponent, but he is only one man. One. Ichigo dipped his head slightly. My condolences. He is the last of the gatekeepers. I see. Kyan sighed. They knew the risks. I hope they were happy in the end. I'm sure they were. They kept using that serum after all. Ichigo leaned back on his chair, smirking. But that is one there still. Kyokaku and Ganju Shiba, they are no real threat. Not against my knights. Panther Lily is tricky, but he will fall too. You have 3 people in total if we count the last of the Earthland mages. There is still Faust. Faust. Ichigo couldn't help but laugh. That old fossil? What help can he give? Unless. Ichigo leaned forward in anger. He took it with him. That old fool. You're familiar with it. Of course I am. I was certain I destroyed it. The resilience of that machine is truly a masterpiece. The king got to his feet, clapping his hands and calling some of the guards into the room. I apologize about not escorting you back myself, but I can't promise that I would be as civil as I would like to be right now. You sure you want to leave me with such weak guards? The guards took a step forward towards Kyan in rage and made to say something before they were silenced by their king's glare. You won't. Oh really? And why not? Because they are still my prisoners. If you escape, I might just decide to keep them instead. Alright already, muttered Kyan, letting the guards escort him away. Ichigo waited till Kyan was gone before sighing as he fell back into his chair. Nozomi stepped out of the shadows as maids began clearing the table, taking a few steps towards the seat Kyan had sat in before her hand reached out and brushed along the underside of the plate. Why do you let him resist you as much as he does? Huh. Ichigo shrugged. Well, he's my brother. You are familiar with what I mean. There is no one else in the entire world who will ever be able to understand me as well as he can. Ichigo frowned as he saw the hurt in her expression. Now don't be like that, you know it is true. He is me, whether he likes it or not. And trust me, we have a lot more in common than he would like to admit. He's stubborn like that. Nozomi slowly nodded before she felt something odd. Her hand shot out and grabbed the maid's arm as she had started reaching for the plate, holding her in place. She lifted up the plate herself before handing it over to the frightened maid, letting the woman rush out of the room. Nozomi didn't care too much for the woman's reaction, instead picking up the shining stone that Kyan had hidden under the side of his plate. Let me see that, said Ichigo, holding out a hand. Nozomi threw it towards him and he snapped it out of the air before glancing closely at the small stone, holding it mere centimeters from his eye. He smiled, recognizing it for what it was. What is it? It's part of the bars, muttered Ichigo, the corners his lips upturning. It was tiny, about the size of a marble, but it absolutely was a piece of the cell's bars. He wondered how he had missed it. The bars must have regenerated themselves when the piece was taken. But if this was all the progress he had made in 6 months, he doubted he'd see his brother escaping anytime soon. Still, he looked at the marble with pride before pocketing it. Good job, brother. Good job. Protector of the fairies. We're here. After a full day of traveling, they had finally arrived. Gajeel looked at the cave's entrance before turning towards the royal city in the distance. Isn't this a bit close? Why are there no defenses here? The legends are enough, trust me. We wouldn't take an army through here. They'd be too afraid to do so. Very well. Let's go already. Pulling out the map, Gajeel slowly began walking, using the rough parts of the map as a guideline. Mistogin followed a bit behind him with one of his staves, using it for a light source. They had looked over the map carefully earlier and, after a lot of effort and mostly guesswork, they had managed to identify which direction they would need to go to find the others. These caves were meant to stretch all the way to the city and continue past it, and there must have been a connecting passageway at some point in time. Before the stories began, it must have been a perfect escape route, as you could spend days wandering all the tunnels and not know where you were if you weren't careful. Mistogin let his hand skim along the wall, feeling small indentations that he felt seemed unnatural. Man-made maybe? With all these tunnels, people must have tried marking on the walls to tell where to go. Using his staff, he slowly caused the light to intensify as he burned a marking into the wall. It would help on the way back if they got lost, especially as he made sure to indicate what direction they were heading in. This same pattern continued for what must have a few hours, simply following a map that stretched much longer than it seemed. How Ganju had the patience to draw this out he would never know. He would have to thank the man when they got back, however. He was a lifesaver here. Finally, they reached the end of the map. From this point on, it was into areas Ganju never managed to enter. And they would have to continue that way in order to make it to the royal city. They kept following the path before reaching a crossroad, 3 paths leading off. Which way do you think? Let me check, muttered Mistogin, examining each wall as he searched for some kind of clue. It was hard to work out which was the way. All the others seemed to be littered with markings, as if trying to tell him to go that way. He froze though. Why would they be on both walls but not one? Both ways couldn't be correct, could then? And then why would you mark a correct route if you knew it was right when there were all these symbols in place? It could only mean one thing. It's this way, Mistogin muttered, pointing at the tunnel with no markings. You sure? Gajeel seemed unconvinced. Why this one? Look at these markings, stated Mistogin, drawing Gajeel closer to them. They are on all these walls but not that one. If you went down a wrong path, you'd come back and mark it. There aren't many paths here though, muttered Gajeel. If that is the case, then a lot of people should have gone down the correct one. I don't see anything wrong with this place yet. Neither do I, but I doubt we are in deep enough yet. Stories exist for a reason. The two pressed further on, heading down the large tunnel. A light seemed to shine at the end and shielded their eyes as they neared the end. That turned out to be a mistake as they felt their feet hit air as they took a step through the entrance. They tried to grab something but it was too late, the two falling down as they desperately tried to grab something on the walls. It ended up only slowing their descent, the two landing flat against the ground after a few seconds of falling. Mist Ogden winced, clutching his side as he used his staff to help support himself. He gave a look up before seeing where they had fallen from. The light seemed to have been the result of something further ahead, and it was a bright light that was for sure if it had distracted them all the way back there. It slowly seemed to dim, allowing him to see the remains of a bridge at the other side of the hole they had fallen into. Is it me, muttered Gajeel, or does that bridge look like it was cut? Mist Ogden nodded. The wood he could see didn't look splintered as if it was broken but instead as if something had cut straight through it. He could see planks of wood scattered around them now that he paid attention, and the word looked fairly odd. How long had this bridge been here, and how long ago had it been cut? We need to keep moving. Hopefully we can find a way back up. There's a way over here, said Gajeel, seeing a tunnel. No idea where it goes but it hopefully leads somewhere. That's our best shot then. The two slowly headed down the tunnel, both on guard now and making sure to be careful where they stood. There was also the question about what cut the bridge. Was whatever did that still here? Or had it been someone long ago to prevent the bridge's use? He would like to think the latter but there was the issue with the light too. That hadn't seemed natural and it had come out of nowhere. He wasn't sure they were alone down here. They ended up entering a large cavern when the tunnel ended, lots of indents in the wall. Gajeel walked over to one before backing away suddenly. I think I know what this place was used for. What? It's a grave, stated Gajeel, Mist Ogden following his gaze as they looked at all the indents, seeing old bones and rags in them. We've fallen into a tomb. Are you scared? I don't know. Maybe? This feels too close to grave robbing to me, and you know what kind of stuff exists in Earthland. A tomb isn't always a safe place to be in if you are unwelcome, or sometimes even if you are welcome. Taking a few steps forward, Mist Ogden couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. They had to get out of this tomb quickly. He could already feel his courage fading the longer they stayed in there. It was far too quiet for his liking and, while that was natural, it wasn't something he liked when he was so tense. A large set of stone stairs led upwards and they followed them, hoping to end up somewhere pleasant. They kept finding more and more of the indents in the walls though and, the further they went, the more that were empty. Finally, they saw an exit. It was a large doorway, two metal doors attached with one at each side. It was the only way they could see out so they took it, slowly forcing the doors open. The sound of clicking suddenly sounded, as if bones were hitting bones. They slowly turned, looking down into the cavern below. They froze as they saw some of the bodies in the indents slowly getting up, and it was happening all over the place as if opening the door had been the trigger. They wasted no time now, pulling it open before slamming it shut behind them, hoping the things waking up wouldn't be able to open the door. And then they ran. It didn't matter where the path took them. They had to get away. How are those things moving? Called Gajeel, looking desperately to Mist Ogden for answers. I don't know. Stuff like that is only found in Earthland, and only in a few certain locations that are the result of necromancy. Edelas isn't able to produce anything like reanimation of dead bodies. It is far beyond their limit of control or power. Then explain to me how those things are moving. I don't know all right. A loud roar filled the air, sounding unhuman in nature. They heard a smash far behind them and they knew to keep running. That was likely the door being broken down. If we use a reverse anima, it will only take the magic, Mist Ogden quickly answered. No undead army, have no fear. Let's just survive this one. The two kept running before they skidded to a halt as they saw the sight ahead of them. You have got to be kidding me. Mist Ogden glanced down the hole, seeing the same sight as before, only reversed. If what he was seeing was correct, they were on the other side of the bridge now. "I think I see why they never marked this way off," said Gajeel in fear. "They never made it back this way." "That can't be it," muttered Mistogan, quickly thinking. "They had to have gone the right way, else the others would have not been marked. They had been labeled as dead ends, and so this had to lead somewhere." He glanced at the remains of the bridge, seeing a sudden difference. The supports here. Before they were cut cleanly through, but here they were hacked into, as if someone was in a hurry. So, it means this is a different bridge. How does that help us? It means that hole leads somewhere else. Without warning, Mistogan jumped down, Gajeel looking back before following after when he heard the increasing of growls and groans. The two landed much more gracefully than before, immediately charging down the tunnel. To Mistogan's satisfaction, they appeared in a different place. It wasn't a tomb this, but instead what looked to be a mine, or at least the remains of one. Noises sounded behind them and he had a good feeling that the creatures had fallen down the hole after them. "Hurry! Upwards!" Rushing to the makeshift ramps, they knocked parts down as they went, slowing down any pursuers. They saw the creatures running into the room after them, searching for them before their eyes locked. They roared before scrambling upwards, using the bodies of others with them as stepping stones. Mistogan smiled in relief though when he saw the way out. Following down it led them to a bridge once more, but he understood what was going on this time. And this time the bridge was intact. They rushed along it, Gajeel's arm transforming to a saw before he swung as they left the bridge, sending the rest of it crashing back behind them. They stopped to turn, seeing the creatures looking at them before slowly walking away. Looking down the hole, he could see why. There wasn't a way around this time. It was just spikes. What was up with that place? How did you know to keep going? They designed it a certain way. Originally bridges had been in place, but whoever made these tunnels positioned them in such a way to make you think you came to where you started, and because of that you go back. Can't they do things easily? Why the need for those things? Mistogan frowned. They shouldn't exist here. I'd say some kind of residue magic reanimated them, but where did it come from? As they continued down the path, they saw it join to another one, and back that path was what looked to be the original cavern they had fallen down. That left only one way to go. They pushed further and further until, finally reaching a large open cavern, the ceiling too high to see. At the center of the cavern looked to be a man-made column, stairs built into it for people to climb. They looked fairly damaged though, as if one step would break them and sent people plummeting to their doom. "When do you think these were last used?" asked Gajeel, examining them cautiously. "A very long time ago, before my father at the very least. Maybe before these tunnels became so dangerous." Gajeel froze suddenly, sniffing the air. "That first bridge. Was it me or did the cut look familiar?" "How so?" "Like it was from a creature from Earthland. Like it was from an actually salamander. I never met one." "What are they like?" "Oh, you know," said Gajeel casually. "Armored lizards, breathe fire, claws sharp enough to cut through armor." "Ah." Mistogan heard the slow growl that sounded. "And, whatever cut that bridge, it's still here then?" "Yeah." The two separated, rolling out of the way as fire burst between them. Mistogan flicked his wrist, his staff flying forward while being joined by another. As the two staves flew past the salamander, lightning surged between the two, the salamander giving off a scream before furiously charging at Mistogan. Gajeel jumped into its path, grabbing it and changing his skin to iron to avoid being cut by the claws. The salamander opened its mouth wide, fire being spewed forward. Gajeel couldn't dodge, so he instead braced against it, slamming his head against the creature's mouth and forcing it shut. Mistogan took that moment to jump on top of the creature's back, slamming a staff against it. The salamander struggled backwards and Gajeel lunged forward, his arm transforming to a blade as he plunged it into the soft underbelly of the salamander. The creature gave one last cry before collapsing, Gajeel removing the blade. "Where did that come from?" Gajeel looked around, searching for the source of the creature. "That is an Earthland salamander. How did it get here?" He turned back to Mistogan only to see the man frozen by a wall, his hand almost touching it. Miss Doggin. That child. That child that wandered into these caves. That story must have appeared about the time of my father. That would make the child, if the child was still alive, about 70 or 80. Miss Doggin. Suppose that child made her way, by pure chance, down the correct paths. She could have been an excitable child, exploring these caves like Ganju did. And let's say she came here but found something else fascinating. Not the stairs, but a strange light. By now Gajeel noticed Miss Doggin's tone sounded almost fearful. I understand now. Miss Doggin took his hand back from where it had been hovering over. Anima has been experimented with for years, since the early days of my father and maybe before then. Magic that rips a hole between dimensions and pulls magic back through it. I should have seen it earlier. What should you have seen? Miss Doggin tapped the wall with one of his staves, a speck of light bursting through a crack before vanishing. The anima tears holes. So what happened to those holes? Why was the king trying to seal off Earthland? He wasn't. He's trying to seal off Edalis. He's trying to close the cracks in these worlds before the worst happens. But what is the worst? I don't know. And that is the scariest part. Protector of the fairies. Had a good time, Kyan. Kyan waved slightly as he was dragged past their cells. They reached his before one of the guards took a small tool and clicked the button a few times. For Wendy watching, it seemed to send out a pulse of magic into the air, enough to create a disturbance or act as a signal. The bars on the cell bent open suddenly and Kyan was thrown it, the bars returning to normal after a few seconds. The moment the guards left, a piece of chicken flew through the air, landing into Listena's outstretched arm. I told him you'd share. My brother's a pain sometimes. The Earthland mages apart from Wendy froze, getting closer to the bars in an attempt to see Kyan closer. Lysina looked at them in confusion before she sounded out her thoughts. What's wrong? Doesn't Kyan sound very familiar? Like the king, for example. Well, yeah, they are brothers. Brothers aren't that identical, muttered Wendy, looking directly into the cell. Not to my eyes. Good eyes, Wendy, Kyan said with a chuckle. Should have realized that I couldn't hide from you all. Kyan got closer to the bars, pushing his hood out of the way so they could see his orange hair, a few dirty patches of black scattered along his head. How have you all been? We were almost fooled before, said Toshiro, even though he knew this time that it had to be their Ichigo. The feeling of familiarity was too strong. What's your name? Right now? Kyan Shiba. Before? Ah. Well, it's been a while since I went by it. Ichigo. Surname. That's none of your business, Toshiro. Surname. I said no. He almost had the reaction he was after. Toshiro gave him one final glare before repeating the question once more. Surname. I said no. Kyan flinched, realizing he had released his anger before he could stop it. Ah, sorry. No, it's okay. I was after that reaction anyway. Toshiro turned back to the others and smiled. It's him. There is no doubt. Toshiro suddenly spun back round and glared straight at Ichigo. How are you here? Where have you been? Miss Doggin said dash. Miss Doggin? He's okay. Yeah. Why shouldn't he be? Don't you remember, said Natsu. He's been in a cell for at least 6 months. Miss Doggin said he had been in Edalis only 1 month. Ah. Kyan seemed to smile in relief. That's good. I thought something bad might have happened, and I can't exactly check here. Should I start at the beginning? Please. Okay then. Kyan shuffled a bit closer as he got comfy on the ground. I assume you know about how Miss Doggin and I got here, so I'll skip most of that. As I was about to leave the danga, the Kautosu touched me. But I was almost out when it did so, which meant I was kind of forced straight out. But being chased seems to distort things if Miss Doggin still arrived a month early. My quick contact with it sent me back a year and a half ago. That's a long time to be off from such brief contact, said Natsu. I think I was lucky. The Kautosu could have easily sent me back much further if I had been further back when it reached me. Kyan sighed. I had no idea what was going on to start with. I thought I was just in a different place to everyone else. I didn't work it out until a few months later. That long. Hey, it was hard. I learned what the king looked like very early on, about my first week being there, and managed to get the stuff I needed to keep my disguise going. I had just kept my hood up in the start, but Ganju and Kyukaku were starting to ask questions. Ganju and Kyukaku. Ichigo nodded. Yeah. I ended up helping them out of some trouble in the first day I was there, and I was in a bit of trouble too, so they helped out in return. When we were even, I thought they would leave, but they stayed. They kind of grew on me and I stopped protesting after a while. Took the name Kyan because, well, you needed a new one. The others looked to Listener in shock. What? I thought about it a few times here. When a copy of you exists, you want to have your own identity in the world. And if he still thought you were going to appear very soon, then he would have wanted an identity he couldn't end up being tied to. Something that could allow him to not get attached. Yeah. Kyan glanced down sadly. The opposite kind of happened. I don't even know how I started leading a rebellion. I guess it was sometime when I started looking into where anima could be. I broke into the royal city once more and found details on it, but I had to leave before I could do anything else. It's where we learned of the possibility of a reverse anima. Kyan shook his head. I don't know how I got people involved with it. I suppose it was the idea of resetting everyone to equal standing. It had been all fine when Faust had been in charge, but the me here is kind of scary powerful to them. He's a good king, don't get me wrong, and people do like him. But others fear what they don't understand. We used that against him. So you created the Shibas in order to get a hold of and use the reverse anima, which by doing so would drag all of us back to Earthland. Toshiro nodded as if it all made sense. I can't believe you got so many people involved. We had successes as time passed. And then others joined, we gained Faust and the remaining exceeds, the gatekeepers were created, it all kind of started falling together. Kyan laughed. It was never supposed to end up as it did though. It was just my selfish attempt at saving our guild in the beginning, and after a while people started truly believing in it. Kyan looked down at the ground in shame. People have died for this cause, and I didn't even start it for why they wanted it. Speaking honestly. Kyan nodded at Listener. I don't think they care. Everyone would join for selfish reasons, whether they are to remove magic or just to get back at people. I joined because I realized it might get me back to Earthland one day. And it isn't like you wouldn't do what you said you would do. I think people died for that purpose and would be happy with that. You can't make people join if your desire was so selfish after all. I see why Kyukaku liked you so much. I never interacted with you much back home except for knowing that you were a nice girl, and that you were in love with Natsu. Well, why didn't you tell me you were from Earthland anyway? You worked out I was easily enough. It's as you said before, said Toshiro. He's Kyan right now, and that helps separate his identity from Ichigo so he doesn't try and create bonds he fears will break once he leaves. They can't return with us, you see, said Kyan softly. Jidanbu, Kyukaku, Ganju, Faust, they all need to stay. They aren't of our world, and as such won't be able to leave once magic leaves this world. Mistagen is in the same situation now unless he has a way back himself, though Panther Lily should be fine along with the other Exceed. They'll get dragged back with us. What was that earlier anyway? Asked Listener. Which part? Before Natsu and the others got here. Yeah. The king said you gave him everything he needed to be aware of the others. And that, if it wasn't for you, they wouldn't be here. And you pointed out that you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Yeah. My brother comes down here to visit often. He's persistent sometimes, and he eventually got me talking. You couldn't always listen in when my brother and I had our chats, remember? I just told stories, a bit of my past sometimes. He'd tell me a bit about his own in exchange. And I let slip something once. I mentioned the anima. But shouldn't he be aware of it? Asked Wendy. You misunderstand. He was, but not that it was why I came there. And, by piecing other parts of what I had told him together, he realized what had happened to me when I entered Edalis. The anima was used by him to steal Magnolia in particular because that was why we came, and hence why I ended up sent backwards. A time loop. Taoshiro frowned. But what started the original event? Not a clue. But once the loop started, it continued like that. The king kept it going because he wanted me here. I'm his brother after all. That's another thing, said Natsu. Why does he call you his brother? You aren't from this world after all. It's hard to explain in normal words. Wendy, you saw how he looks. Would you say he has the same feeling as I do? Wendy nodded. The magic around you is the same. You see. That's why we refer to one another that way, though it was him who started it. I guess he was happy to have someone who had the same gift as him. And the thing about the king is that he sees what Wendy sees too. And worse, he can control it. It's how I ended up in here. You can't escape. Taoshiro glanced at his handcuffs. Do you have a pair of these? Kyan waved his own cuffs. More elegant because of my brother, but they do the same thing. It's why you can't sense me. Normally I leak out enough magic for anyone nearby to notice, but these completely seal it in. Ichigo shrugged. I wish I had a pair of these earlier though. How much magic do you guys have left? The majority, said Taoshiro. He looked over to Wendy and Natsu, who both shrugged. I'd say about 3/4, said Natsu simply. Wendy nodded at his answer, saying the same. You're lucky then. I'm running on about 1/4. So low. Taoshiro couldn't believe it. How did you lose so much? You remember that I leak a lot anyway. Without the normal absorption we have back home, I was unable to replenish it normally. I did my best to suppress it, but it isn't something that is natural for me to do, and maybe mages with similar amounts of power will say the same. That is where 1/4 of my magic went to, and this was after I managed to replenish bits and pieces with the serum we used for Jidanbu and the other gatekeepers. As for half of it, well, I wasted far too much when I fought the king. We heard you battled him, and that you lost. Yeah. Kyan looked nervous at this. I underestimated him. I did it a few times before, especially at the start. I didn't believe anyone could sense my presence and as such almost got caught. When I fought the king, however, I didn't expect he would be able to counter me so easily. I kept holding back too much too. I didn't use Bankai, and by the time I realized he was strong enough to warrant it, it was too late. How? That was Taoshiro's simple question. How did he manage to beat you? He's a Quincy. A Quincy? Taoshiro frowned. You've mentioned them once or twice, merely in passing. What are they? They're mages who could manipulate Eternino in the atmosphere. You can see how it would still be effective here. Any more I know of them came from my brother. I'll tell you, that thing about magic loving us makes him deadly as it lets him gather energy so easily and quickly. But how did you lose? Because my attacks weren't impacting as I thought they were. A Getchuga Tenshou would simply have the energy in it dismantled without me noticing, and the Kita wasn't getting through because it wasn't strong enough. He's skilled enough to fight against Zanjutsu as well. You still have your hollow abilities. That's the other problem. Kyan slowly pulled open his coat and pulled up his top, revealing the skin beneath it. Under it they could see a faint scar running across his chest, seeming to continue up to his left shoulder from what they could see. I'm not healing. Protector of the Fairies. Prison break. Miss Doggin slowly scaled the stairs, Gajeel not willing to let what they had seen go. How are you so sure that the anima is tearing holes between our worlds? Isn't it obvious? Miss Doggin waved his hand around in the general direction the creatures they had run from before had been in. Don't you remember those things? They would have been reanimated by magic from Earthland, but where did this come from? A rip between the worlds, one above there and one above somewhere in Earthland where this magic could seep through. And the salamander came through another tier. Already then. But what about the girl? Girl. That story. You changed near the end from the child being an unknown gender to the child being female. Miss Doggin smiled awkwardly. I suppose I did. Just my own opinion. No. Gajeel wasn't willing to let this go. You were certain. Why? Mistogan's shoulders slowly slumped in defeat. What I'm about to tell you is private. It's between us, understand? No one can know. She doesn't exactly want it public knowledge, and I'm only telling you because you will at least respect that need here. Fine. Good. Mistogan slowly said one name. Poor Lyusica. Poor Lyusica? Isn't that the old lady in the forest? That's the one. Just don't let her hear you refer to her as that. Really? Her. I know it may sound hard to believe, but it is true. She never said much to me, but she did reveal that she had come from Edelas and that she decided to stay in the end. It only fits that the child who vanished all those years ago was poor Lyusica. It could have been anyone else though. Mistogan shook his head. No, it has to be here. The age matches, and it isn't exactly common for people to stumble between worlds, especially back then when these rips would have been tiny or not even there. This must have been one of the original rips, and it certainly fits considering the source of anima is somewhere in the city above. I see. Gajeel frowned. I feel sorry for her then. Don't be. She prefers our world to hers. She says she misses her family at times, but said she made her choice and she was sure her family would respect that. Still, it must have been lonely, being the only one from another world. I heard Makarov was her friend back then. He and a few others, and Fairy Tale was still a hectic place back then. They became friends and he helped her feel welcome and part of this world. Then why does she hide away in a forest? Because our world has horrors too. Mistogan sighed. I know nothing much about her, but she says she hates humans. She makes exceptions for people, mainly Fairy Tale, but she still says it. I don't know when she started believing that, but something big must have happened. Humans are capable of as much evil as good in the end. Mistogan took another step before it suddenly broke, the man grabbing onto anything he could for dear life. He slowly pulled his leg back up before placing it on the next step, testing it more carefully for any weaknesses. They stopped talking after that, too focused on making sure they didn't die in the stairs. They breathed a sigh of relief when they finally ended, seeing a small archway placed against the wall. They walked over to it, seeing a small piece of rock sticking out and looking like it could be pressed. Here goes nothing, muttered Mistogan. And then he pressed it. Protector of the fairies. For how long? Toshiro finally asked, unbelieving of what he was hearing. Is this something to do with Edelas? Kyan took a slow breath. No, I don't think it is. I didn't bother to mention it, but I've been cautious since Nirvana. My healing rate had been slowly slowing down before I even came here, and I realized the truth completely when I took that hit. That was my biggest mistake. Since my other attacks hadn't been working, I allowed myself to get too close and took the hit, aware that it wouldn't be a problem to deal with. Funny really. It was that which almost killed me in the end. Lucky the king didn't want me to die in the end. And that is how you ended up here? Kyan nodded at Natsu's question. That's it. From start to finish? You've had a long adventure here. Trust me, I know. Well, it's good to see you're all alright. Everyone turned to see Mistogan and Gajeel standing in the doorway, smirking like idiots. Mistogan spotted Kyan before he couldn't help but burst out into laughter. Of all the people, the one we thought lost was our elusive leader. I'm glad you are okay, Ichigo. You too, Mistogan. Any problems on re-entry? None. Hurt a bit hitting the ground though. I expected to be a bit lower than I was. Mistogan gestured forward to Gajeel and the Dragon Slayer went to their cells, a set of keys in his hands. How did you get those? Asked Natsu. How did you even get in here? In the better question, said Toshiro. It can't have been easy. Tunnels, Gajeel said simply. Lots of tunnels. You went that way? Kyan looked at them in pity. You poor fools. It was you that destroyed the second bridge, I assume. Yeah. Was there another one? Yeah. That's good then. I had to double back anyway when I ran into a brick wall. By that point they weren't chasing me, so I could move more freely. Ichigo looked at Mistogan seriously. I assume you saw it too. Yeah. How much do you know? Enough. The king tells me stuff so I know what he's doing. Natsu looked between the two as Gajeel fiddled with finding the correct key. What's wrong? There's tears between our world and Edela's, explained Mistoggen. And magic is seeping through. That is why the king is trying to seal off Earthland, or to be more exact he is trying to seal off Edela's. The method would work, said Kyan, but we stick to the original plan. Use the reverse anima. I came to the same conclusion. The tears are stopped from closing due to exposure to magic on both sides. If we suck all magic back to Earthland, the tears will shut and nothing will be able to get between the dimensions. And to do that you need to get us out of here first. Kyan nodded in approval. Good, get the others out of here. I need to warn you before you go so I'll use this time now. You aren't coming, stated Mistoggen simply. He could see it in Kyan's eyes. Yeah. These bars can't be destroyed easily, and you won't be able to do enough damage in time. Besides, the king knows of this escape attempt. He won't care because you actually got here, but he will if I leave. We can't leave you, protested Toshiro. You need to. Besides, I can't yet. You want to find out what he is trying to teach you, don't you, said Lysina. He always mentions that when he visits. I'm close, and I'll never get a chance like this without this cell. Give me until you launch the attack. After that you can break me out and I won't complain. You have my word, said Mistoggen, walking up to Kyan's cell. What do you need to tell me then? The knights. They have powerful abilities. Their source is the anima, however. Anima doesn't have to link to our world alone. It can link to other places, other dimensions. Senna in particular is extremely deadly. Tell Faust he must focus all his firepower on her. The other knights must be dealt with by us. Are you sure? I'm positive. Trust me, I've heard enough from Ichigo to understand this. It's going to be confusing hearing the king called Ichigo and you Kyan. Bear with it for now please. It's only until this is all over. Mistoggen sighed. Very well. He looked behind him to see all the others freed, their restraints removed and their power returned. He quickly stepped forward towards Kyan and placed the set of keys in his hand after taking them back off Gajeel. We'll be back for you. Kyan nodded. I'll see you lot in about a day roughly now. A day it is then. Kyan raised a hand in farewell. Good luck getting out of the city. I'd advise taking the sewers. Got me out the first time. Mistoggen returned the wave before leading the group out, Toshiro waiting for a moment as he stood alone in front of Kyan. I thought you were dead. I'm sorry Toshiro. Please don't do something like this again. Kyan looked up to see Toshiro struggling to remain composed, for once acting like the kid he truly was. Please. Kyan reached out of the cell and placed a hand on Toshiro's head and ruffled his hair fondly. I promise. I'm not going to die so easily. I feel insulted you thought I was. Toshiro quickly changed back to his serious persona. Please, I knew you were fine. I had complete faith. That's my student. Hurry after the others, else you'll get left behind. You won't want that. Toshiro nodded, rushing to the door. He stopped just as he was leaving, turning back towards Kyan. I'm glad to see you Ichigo. You too Toshiro. You too. Protector of the fairies. Careful, said Mistoggen, the group carefully navigating the edge of the tower. The hallways had only provided so much cover until the patrols slowly had started to escalate. They had even seen one of the knights heading to the cells at one point, and they knew they would have been noticed by now. It didn't help that they had been forced upwards due to the strong patrols at the bottom and were hoping other ways out would be apparent as they explored. Thinking back, Kyan had only said they would have safety from the king and never said anything about anyone else. That meant they could be dealing with who knows what on their way out. After narrowly dodging the latest group, they had taken refuge outside, holding on to dear life onto the edges of the window. Mistoggen carefully poked his head up, seeing no one there. All clear. Up you come. He pulled himself up, extending a hand out to Wendy and helping her up. Natsu and Gajeel got up easily themselves while Toshiro simply used his grip on the air beneath his feet to push him up. This place is crawling with guards, stated Gajeel. This isn't going to work if we simply try and sneak past. What do you suggest? Fighting them. Mistoggan shook his head. You heard Ichigo's warnings to us. We don't want to risk getting found with these odds, especially with how worried he seemed about this Senna girl. To be honest, I'm not familiar with her yet. She's meant to be the right hand of the king himself, and a position like that isn't given lightly. We could try a rush tactic. Toshiro gestured outside at the open window. I can fly through the air here and could at least take Wendy with me. If Natsu could use that technique he used against Brain, he could perhaps try and take Gajeel. And I've heard you have a technique that lets you become mist. Natsu shook his head. I can't use fire drive for something so simple. Do you understand how much magic it drains? I don't pretend to understand how that air-walking stuff you do works, but considering how easily it gets used by you and the other Shinigami, I doubt it costs much magic. No, it doesn't. Only needs a decent level of control and a steady flow. I can't just use my mist form either, said Mistoggan. I like to pride myself on its use considering my personal situations, but it has a very limited range. I can't make it to the edge of the city with it. I've got an idea. Gajeel's arm changed to an iron club, the man lifting it and resting it over his shoulder. Salamander, you remember what I did to the guild when I was in Phantom Lord? How could I forget? Natsu muttered. You basically ruined the place. Recognition shone in Natsu's eyes suddenly as he got what Gajeel was suggesting. Oh, that could work. What could? Asked Wendy, looking between the two curiously. Gajeel smirked before leaning out the window, a small thud being heard from outside. Wendy leaned out the window, seeing Gajeel pulling his arm away to leave the iron club in place in the wall, the iron having been molded into a platform. Gajeel glanced at Mistoggan and waited for the man's acknowledgement. He didn't have to wait long as Mistoggan had a look of awe on his face when he looked back at him. That could work. Let's try it. Follow after me then. Gajeel hopped down onto the first platform, using his magic to create a new one at the next layer. He had to be conservative with his magic, but he wasn't having to worry just yet, especially as he had yet to consume much since being in Edalis. All he had to do was make sure the gaps weren't too large as to not make it too difficult for Toshiro and Wendy to jump between the two. As Gajeel worked one each layer, Natsu slowly followed after him, Toshiro going next and Wendy following after. Mistoggan was about to follow when he heard a noise. He quickly activated his mist form, changing to an invisible substance just as a strange man entered the corridor. He recognized the man. If he remembered correctly, then that meant the man was Don Kanonji. That wasn't too bad. The man was the weakest of all the knights and there was no way that he would. Who's there? Mistoggan froze. That was impossible. He shouldn't be able to be seen. The man couldn't be a censor, could he? The man's eyes seemed to lock with his as the man slowly waved at him. He reluctantly waved back, Don smiling at him innocently. I hope I wasn't bothering you, said Don, taking a step forward. I was just on guard. Some prisoners have escaped after all. Mistoggan shrugged, letting a hand rest outside on the window's edge where he let it become visible and make signals to the others. He hoped they got them as any source of noise from them was gone now, and that either meant they had gone far enough to be out of earshot or that they had noticed his warnings. Don looked at him curiously, bringing a hand to the back of his neck to scratch it. I don't really want to have to deal with this right now, but a hero can never let evil escape. Without warning, Don grabbed a staff that had been resting on his back before swiping down with it, Mistoggan bringing one of his own up to block the strike as his mist form faded around him. You're... Mistoggan brought his knee up into Don's stomach, causing the man to kneel over in pain. Without wasting the chance, Mistoggan leaped over the windowsill, landing on the first platform. He looked and saw the others already halfway down. Gajeel moved quickly, and he saw Toshiro look up at him and say something to the others. Maybe they had seen his warning then. He followed down after them rapidly, already hearing the shouts of the night above him. A blast of magic shot past him, Mistoggan glancing over his shoulder to see Don firing down at him from his staff. He reached the others when they were about to touch the floor, leaping down next to them before giving Don one last glance. He saw the man had left the window and was leaping between the platforms desperately as he tried to chase them. They didn't have time to watch him, however, quickly rushing off to the edge of the district they were in. With the military part between them and the civilian areas, it was much easier to take a risk and leap down from the wall, avoiding the district entirely. Gajeel went first like before, creating platforms as he leaped and stabbed at the wall. He didn't bother with being quiet or being careful this time. It only had to help them down quickly this time, not carefully. The result was that they ended up getting noticed, people screaming as they came rushing down and shouting for guards. They knew that meant the gate would be shut because of that, so it left the sewers like Kyan had suggested. They popped into the first entrance they could find, holding their breath a bit when the smell hit them. Following the path down, they heard noises behind them as if soldiers were following. And it sounded like they might have been gaining. As they reached the end, however, a figure stepped into view. He raised a hand before patting a large vehicle next to him. "All aboard, Shebas," said Ganju happily. "Glad to see you all got out okay." "Protector of the fairies. What do you mean you left him there?" "Calm down, sis," said Ganju seriously. "Let's at least hear them out first before you try and kill them." Kyukaku took a deep breath, her fists gripping the table enough for small cracks to appear along it. "What do you mean you left Kyan back there? You were right there, weren't you? Why did you not rescue Kyan too?" "He refused to leave," Miss Doggin said simply. "We would never be able to escape as we did if we had someone not willing to follow." "But why? Why the hell did he stay behind?" "He said there was something he needed to do. Something he needed to learn before he could leave, and that this was his only chance." Kyukaku sighed, turning to Lisana, who had taken a place by her side. "Get me a drink. The strong stuff." "Yes, Miss Kyukaku. Just tell me." Kyukaku looked at Miss Doggin hopefully. "Tell me he was okay there. Tell me he wasn't hurt." "He wasn't. If anything, he probably had the best cell in the place." Miss Doggin suddenly frowned. "Now that I think about it, I think he even had a bed in there. And I mean a proper bed, not just a mat." "He got that?" Lisana scowled. "And here the king only gave me a thin mattress, and that was only after Kyan complained to him enough." Kyukaku raised her glass as Lisana finished filling it, taking a large gulp from it. "Leave it to my brother to manage to even get the king on his side to some degree." They looked similar, didn't they? "Yes." Miss Doggin chose his words carefully here, not willing to tell Kyan's secret unless he allowed it. Kyan referred to the king as his brother, and the king did likewise. "I always knew something was up between those two," muttered Kyukaku, taking another gulp. "The king went to face him in person. He never did that for anyone else. And then he kept Kyan for 6 months. Explains why there was never talk of an execution, despite how much that would have damaged our morale. We'll just have to listen to his whims until we can get him out. He agreed to give up if he hadn't done it by the time we made it there. He has his key at least for his cuffs, so, if he does escape the cell, he will be there to help as soon as he can." Kyukaku gestured for another glass as Lisana filled one up for her. She grabbed the seat next to her too, forcing Lisana to sit down in it. "Pour yourself a glass too, kid. You're not much older than me, Miss Kyukaku. I'm still older, and you need to listen to your seniors." She passed the bottle down to Miss Doggin after Lisana had poured herself one before raising her glass hesitantly. "This is it, isn't it?" "Yes," said Miss Doggin, raising his own. "The finale. All or nothing. Everyone's assembling. We're bringing every little gadget, every little secret we've hidden. We won't have a single thing left if this all fails. Then we must instead make sure it all succeeds." Miss Doggin brought his glass to his lips. "To marching to war." Kyukaku matched his actions, Lisana copying her. "And to surviving beyond it." "Protector of the fairies. What are you doing, Faust?" Faust looked up from his work at the machine he was at. "Is that you, Jidanbu?" Jidanbu stepped into view. "Yes." "Ah, good." Faust waved a hand towards a set of lacrima. "Pass me them, will you? I'm just trying to test everything." Jidanbu picked up one of the lacrima, holding it curious. "This is a strange lacrima. I don't think I have seen many like this one. You won't have. Faust walked over to the man, taking the lacrima from his hands. It's the part of the last set I have left from my time as a king. We destroyed all research on Dragon Slayer magic from Earthland that we had gathering, making sure it wouldn't end up being used against us one day. This here holds that great destructive power in it, fashioned from the energy of a dragon itself. A dragon? Those are creatures from Earthland, I assume. Yes. Very powerful creatures. We wouldn't be able to even scratch them under normal circumstances. The energy in these lacrima is mostly made up of excess energy they were emitting, just like many mages in Earthland do. I had precautious for events like this one day. I hid these, scattering them around the kingdom in obscure places where no one would ever find them. Why? Jidanbu stared at the other lacrima in confusion. What is so special about them though? Do they enhance the power of magic tools, making them stronger? In some ways. Faust took the lacrima he was holding before walking over to the machine he had been working on, slotting the lacrima into one of the arms before having the armor around it seal it behind a metal shield. This is the last great weapon I had as the king. Kyan helped get the remains back, and we've all had to labor together to get this thing back into how it was. Or at least close to what it was. I doubt the armor will ever be as strong as it once was after the king damaged it before. You were capable of fighting against the king in this machine. Jidanbu's shock was evident in his voice. Faust laughed. I wish. He still beat me, but it wasn't easy for him, I would like to believe. Even the king's attacks couldn't pierce this armor easily when it was in its prime. And now? Faust sighed. Now? I honestly don't know. Maybe it would stand up against him, but maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. Faust looked at Jidanbu. What about you anyway? How are you feeling? I am fine. I appreciate you trying to reassure me, but I don't need lies here, even if they are kinder. Then I would change my answer. I feel weak. It is sometimes hard to move, as if each step is too draining to even try. It's almost over, my friend. If things were different, I would ask you to sit out this fight, but we know what will likely happen this day. I know. I was prepared for it from the start. And you are okay with that? Jidanbu slowly lowered himself to one knee, bowing his head. I chose this path. I continued to walk this path, and I have you to thank for that. Kyan may be the leader to most, but you were the one who inspired me to fight. I respected you as a kid, even if you may not look back on those days with pride. And that is why I must ask of you for one last favor, my king. Faust shook his head. I can't. Please. Faust looked at the man sadly, seeing the serious look in his eyes. You know what this will do to you. The original serum is already like poison, and this one is no different. If you take it, then your life expectancy will be measured in minutes rather than hours. I have to. Faust sighed. Very well. And I am truly sorry you have to go through this all. My king, it was my choice. I am not afraid. Not yet, but I fear you may be in the end. Protector of the fairies. Don't you dare worry me like that again. Wendy hugged Carla happily, ignoring the rant she was hearing. I missed you, Carla. Of course you did. What were you thinking? Joining a battle? Getting captured? Honestly, I leave you for one day and you get into far too much trouble for my liking. I'll be fine. You'll be fine. Carla looked at her in shock. No, I refuse to allow you to go back out there. But Carla dash. No. You're far too young. And I refuse for you to end up in as much danger as you did last time. I have to, muttered Wendy softly. The others need my help. What if they need healing? Or what if the enemy is too strong and they need support? I can do that. It's dangerous. I know. But I need to do this. Wendy hugged Carla closer to her. Everyone in Fairy Tale is counting on us. Ichigo told us that we would need to deal with the other knights while the rebels deal with this girl. Senna, I think she was called. What is he thinking? Muttered Carla. You're just a kid. He shouldn't be asking for you to help out in such dangerous situations. He didn't. I made this decision myself. Carla sighed. I can't persuade you, can I? No, you can't. Carla let out another sigh. Well, it looks like I'm going to be seeing this battlefield close up. This was Wendy's turn to be shocked. Carla? You can't dash. I can't what? I can't fight too. But Carla. You mother. She'll understand, said Carla firmly. Whose partner am I? I'm yours. And don't think for a moment that the he-cat won't be joining Natsu too. You can tell me no as many times as you want, but I'll still chase after you, and I'll carry you home when you're exhausted afterwards. A knock on the door sounded by them and they turned to look, seeing Natsu's head sticking through the open door. Come on, we're heading off. Wendy and Carla looked at one another before coming to an agreement. Coming. Protector of the fairies. Nozomi took a large breath of air as she collapsed to the floor, the pink liquid of the tank falling out around her. She gasped for air before shivering, a large coat being thrown over her naked form. She looked up to see Ichigo there, concern on his face. Are you okay? I'm fine, she muttered abruptly. It's nothing. He was your brother. He was also me. He said himself he wished he could continue to protect me as I grew older. Now he can. Ichigo slowly nodded. If you are sure. Rest for now. You need to let the effects of the procedure wear off if you want to not injure yourself. Thank you. Nozomi shivered a bit more, pulling the coat further around her to try and get warmer. I still remember him, you know. Nozomi looked at him in confusion. Your brother. Ah. Realization dawned on Nozomi's face. I'm surprised you remember him. He barely said a few words to you before he slipped into that coma, and then never awoke from it. I don't forget interesting people. Kajiroza was that kind of man, even if he was a bit misguided at times. Nozomi knew what Ichigo meant. Loneliness is not a sin, no matter what the circumstances. I don't need help from others. Other people only get in the way. To help is mere pity. It is jealousy towards the strong. An insult to a noble spirit. To be alone is to be the only one. The privilege of a superior soul. Exactly word for word. I guess he told me that since he felt we were kindred spirits somehow and wanted to pass on me some words of wisdom for my crusade. Of course I couldn't say that I disliked his philosophy, as it would have been quite disrespectful, but I can say it now. Ichigo raised a hand, magic gathering around it as he made it sparkle and dance around his palm. I don't think I was ever alone like he believed I was. Magic was always by my side, keeping me company from the moment I was born. People do not get in the way, and it is people who help gives us strength. It is not the privilege of a superior soul to be alone, but rather the curse of one. My lord. Ichigo placed a hand on Nozomi's head kindly. Do you think I'm wrong? No. Good. Because you two were always of one mind. To say one thing but to act on another. Your brother was like that in my opinion. No matter how much he denied it and stuck to his beliefs, I believe he would have thrown his own life away if it meant saving yours. I'd like to think he would too. Good. That's why I got Ririka to prepare you something. Ichigo reached up behind a desk before pulling up a large weapon. It looked to be a large ring, a pole sticking through the middle of it with two blades attached to each end. Around the ring were 6 protrusions, the main 2 perpendicular to the blades while the other 4 were in between the gaps. Where the blades met the ring, a lacrima slot was present, only 1 lacrima placed in the weapon out of the 2 slots available. Nozomi looked at the weapon in shock, a shaking hand reaching out towards it. This is. I asked for her to modify it somewhat. I've seen you practicing with your brother's old version of this and I got Ririka to alter it for your own use. Ichigo tapped the lacrima attached to the weapon. This was to be your brother's if I remember correctly. It should work compatible with you however, just like it would have for him. He was still in a coma when you must have made this. Nozomi looked up, confused. Why did you still make it if you didn't know if he would wake up? I guessed. But this decision works too. You are both Nozomi and Kajiroza now, and as such should carry the wills of both of them into battle. Nozomi held out her hand, light flashing into it as her sword appeared. She slowly took out the lacrima and the hilt before attaching it into her new weapon, the lacrima flashing lightly before dimming to normal levels. It fits. Of course it does. Store it wherever you store it. I'm sure it is some kind of anima-related magic I'm not familiar with, so I'll avoid the explanation on it. Just make sure you are all rested for now. You'll need it in a few days' time. Yes, my lord. Protector of the fairies. The fight for the world. Move the cannons into position. I want squads 5 through 9 stationed nearby on protection detail. We're going to need those if we want to get past the walls. Don't forget to reinforce the flanks, called Ganju, waiting till his sister had finished shouting. We need more troops there. It already looks far too weak, so let's at least make it look tougher so they don't take advantage of that fact. I need all of the support ready to provide covering fire with your magic staves, shouted Miss Doggan. Doesn't matter where you are, just make sure you are in range of people to help them out when they get in trouble. Are all mechanical units fueled up and armed? Faust glanced around at the engineers running about. Don't come crying back if you forget. It's hectic, isn't it? Muttered Taushiro, looking towards Gajeel and Panther Lily beside him. It is. Panther Lily glanced at the skies above them. A clear day. A lot of visibility for both sides. Whether that will show to be a good or bad thing, only time will tell. What's the plan anyway? Gajeel looked up. They didn't tell you? Must have assumed one of us would spread the word. Hold on. Gajeel turned his head to Natsu before shouting out to him. Hey Salamander, make sure the squirt knows the plan. She has a name, called Carla by Wendy's side. Use it. Don't worry, shouted Natsu in response. I'll tell her now. That's one problem sorted then. Gajeel glanced back at Taushiro. Natsu and I tagged along to the meeting once we got here. Why did no one tell me? You were asleep. We decided to let both you and Wendy rest. Ah. Fair point. Good. Now that we have that out of the way, I'll let you know what's happening. Gajeel raised a hand, pointing at the large wall that made up the royal city's perimeter. From what intelligence suggests, that wall is made up of sekizeki. It's a powerful substance that I assume you remember from your short time in prison. I remember. I couldn't use my magic when those cuffs were on me. Treya had a wall made of it too, I think they said. Gajeel shrugged. It's not the real problem though. It was before because we couldn't get enough firepower close enough to start with, hence the infiltration force. Things are different this time. He's right, said Panther Lily. You can't see it yet, which means they have yet to activate it, but there are 3 generators scattered around the city on the wall edges. Do you see them? Taushiro followed Panther Lily's gaze, seeing 3 main towers on the wall edge around the city. Yeah, I see them. Good. Large lacrima are held within each one, sending power up to a barrier they can generate around the entire city. And the controls for it are meant to be held within the central tower where the king resides. So can we take down just one? Asked Taushiro. Would that ruin the shield? We don't know, said Gajeel. From what the others told me, this shield has yet to be used on such a large scale. It is as much of an unknown for them as it is for us. I don't think they even know how much punishment it can take or if it weakens with each power source lost. Panther Lily pointed at each location. Our objective is to take down each tower, allowing free access to the city. We have 4 squads for this task, organized by Miss Doggan as he seemed to know you lot best. Me, Panther Lily and Wendy are 1, stated Gajeel. We take Tower A. Tower B is yours, continued Panther Lily. Tower C is Natsu's while Miss Doggan will approach the central tower and attempt to infiltrate it. Natsu and I have our own towers? Why such a large group for you lot? Gajeel and Panther Lily looked at one another, Gajeel scowling before admitting the truth behind it. Salamander is stronger than me. That's it, I said it. He's got a lot more power. Panther Lily and I are teamed up to make up for that, and Wendy is with us for safety. That doesn't sound like all of it. No, admitted Panther Lily, it is not. Our hope is that we will be enough to quickly overpower anything or anyone there and can move on to back up Natsu and then you. Why me last? Gajeel gestured at Taoshiro's Zanpakuto. That thing is why. You're enough of a threat to handle yourself with that. Natsu's strong but he's a close-range fighter, and that could have its disadvantages. You can escape much more easily if things go south. I don't agree with Mistogan going alone to the central tower though. Panther Lily looked towards the man, watching him ordering around a few more men. It is far too dangerous to approach the tower like he will be, especially as the king will likely be present. And I fear his skills will not be enough to avoid detection. From the sound of it, I don't think he can succeed. Taoshiro frowned. He must know that too. Unless. What is it? Maybe he isn't meant to succeed. Panther Lily looked at Taoshiro, speaking slowly and coldly. Explain. Now. It's just my theory dash. I don't care, just explain. Taoshiro's shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine. I don't think he is meant to win, and is instead meant to be a distraction. A distraction? Yes. Taoshiro gestured wildly at the central tower. If the king is such a threat, then we don't want him stopping us before we get the barrier down. Then we can pool everything at him if needed. Sacrificing himself to buy us more time. Panther Lily looked at Mistogan. It sounds like the kind of thing he might do. Something bugs me though. Panther Lily turned towards Gajeel as the mage spoke. No one said how we would even get in, and I just assumed it would be apparent, but I have yet to think of the reason. How can we even get past the barrier in the first place? We may not be able to tear it down to begin with, but enough force can still open a hole, that we are sure of. Jidanba will open the path and then we must speed through. What about Faust, Kyokaku, and Ganju? Asked Taoshiro. Are they coming too? We still need commanders back here. Someone needs to rally everyone and keep the battle going towards our favor. Look, muttered Taoshiro, pointing towards Faust and Kyokaku. It looks like they're starting. Protector of the Fairies. Ryrika straightened her armor, checking it was on correctly once more before turning to the others. Is that really enough, Senna? Senna looked down at herself, trying to see what was wrong with her outfit. It was a simply black robe that extended down to her knees, her usual red ribbon wrapped round her waist. Apart from that, her hair was tied up as usual, and she had a new weapon in place on her back, the ribbon helping holding it up. While she normally used a sword, that wasn't her combat weapon. It was just something she used to defend herself with during her breaks, and that was ignoring the ability she possessed. Now however, she had a monk's staff, her movements causing the rings at the top of the staff to jingle. A single lacrima rested in the staff where the central ring met the rest of the staff. What's wrong with it? Not much protection there. How is yours any different? You're like a little bunny rabbit. Can that even count as armor? Of course it can, argued Ryrika, blushing as she hugged her chest. She slowly moved her arms to draw attention to them and the armor covering them from her hands to her elbows. A lacrima could be seen in each of the armor plating by her hands, a spike on opposite sides of the lacrimas. A heart-shaped chest plate shielded her body somewhat while a white hat with long rabbit ears rested on her head. Besides, I think it's cute. I suppose it works then, admitted Senna. Cuteness is way too important for you though. Are you okay, Nozomi? Nozomi nodded. My weapon is sealed away for now, but I can get it later. Thank you for it, Ryrika. No problem, muttered Ryrika, embarrassed. Where's your armor though? I needed armor. The question sounded so innocent that Ryrika almost fell over in shock. Yes. Ah. I think I'll be okay. I'm good at dodging and armor would weight me down. What is up with you two? Relax, Ryrika, said Sujiro. They don't need armor in case you forgot. It is simply how they fight. You ignored a lot of it too. Sujiro tapped the white mask on his face, 3 indents on either side allowing sight through it. This is all I need. That's just because you got horribly burned by that dragon slayer. Ryrika smirked. Aren't you worried? You lost so badly last time. I was heavily outnumbered and, unlike you, I can't just lock people away to put off dealing with them. Some of us have abilities better suited for actual fighting. Sujiro slowly reached into his cloak, pulling out a golden lacrima. Besides, I have this if the worst comes to worst. Are you an idiot? Ririka went to grab the object from Sujiro's hands, but he quickly put it out of reach as he avoided her clutches. Do you want to die or something? That thing could kill you if you use it. The serum the Shibas have does the same if I am not correct. At least theirs takes time to do so. You'd have until that thing runs out of juice. Then let's hope I don't have to use it. You better not, said Dawn, waving his cane at the man. Do so and I'll hunt down your spirit and bring it back here so you can get shouted at once more. Sujiro looked at Dawn, seeing the man's new outfit. Most of it was the same except it was much more heavily armored with things like arm and leg guards along with a chest plate that covered his chest. He had still kept the cape though and the hat. Dawn leaned on his staff, Sujiro noticing the lacrima on the top of it, shaped into a skull's head with wings attached to it. Aren't you the one in most danger? You are the weakest out of us all. That is why I have my hero armor. It wouldn't stop my blade. Dawn looked towards Shuakura, the man wearing exactly the same stuff as he did always. One of the only differences was that his bookmark was a different one in his hands, darker in color with faint markings along it. If he remembered correctly, it was just a simple bookmark, and yet Shuakura could still change it into a weapon with ease. The other was a small ring on his right index finger, faint traits of green energy seeming to glow around it. That he knew what it was. An amplifier. Can anything even stop your blade? Asked Sujiro. It's overkill in my opinion. It is a lot more subtle than you are. Don't you use your blade to send ice dragons flying at people. Want me to send one flying at you? Calm down. The voice that spoke caused them to all fall silent, recognizing the voice of their king. They bowed their heads, falling to one knee as the king approached them. They felt the embrace of the magic around them through the king's will, looking up to see him smiling at them. My warriors, my loyal companions, my eternal knights, I thank you. Senna opened her mouth but closed it when Ichigo looked at her, realizing he wasn't done yet. You have stuck by my side for all these years, even as I pursued my own selfish goal. A world with magic that would never run out. We fought against the old rule that threatened that future, wresting control from them before they made a bad situation worse. And now, after 3 years of work, we are so close. We can achieve this goal. Ichigo waved his hand to the side, his anger felt through the air. But these people would threaten this future. The future we worked so hard to build for all. We are this kingdom's finest. The strongest of all of Edalis. Can we accept losing here to them? To this Shiba clan? Ichigo flicked his wrist, a sword appearing in a burst of energy, the guard of the blade shaped like a bird. He slammed the point of the sheath against the ground as he cried out his response to that question. I tell us today, no. We will not fall. We will not fail. We will stand and fight and we will crush those that they send. They believe their resolve is stronger? We will show them resolve. We will show them all that we can do and we will win. So I ask you now. Will you fight with me? The 6 looked between themselves, all knowing their answer. Even if they had difficulties with some of them, they never argued on this one simple fact. Together as one, the knights brought up an arm to the chest, right over their heart. Yes, your majesty. Ichigo smiled. That you my old friends. Protector of the fairies. Friends, allies, Shibas, I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for coming here today. For following us this far. Kyokaku took a deep breath before pointing at the royal city. So far, everything we have done, it will be nothing compared to this. We stand at the gates of hell and we must keep moving forward past them. Kyokaku noticed the restless faces and quickly continued. I won't lie to you. Our chances are low. We're up against such impossible foes, and our chances of success aren't high. As people's heads started to drop, she let her voice increase as she put more passion into her words. But what is wrong with that? We knew it was an impossible task in the beginning. And yet we did it, time after time. We proved that we had what it took to tackle the obstacles ahead of us and we overcame them again and again, never once failing. We made mistakes, I won't deny that, but we never faltered. Not when we lacked support, not when we struggled with what to do, and not when Kyan was captured by the enemy. Faust joined her, taking the chance to join in. We became united, bound by the same goal. Many once asked us why we would want to get rid of magic when we used it too. The answer was that we would be fools not to. We weren't afraid to use it to achieve that goal. But in the end, magic cannot remain in this world. Faust looked amongst the group. Those people in the city down there, and those around all the rest of the kingdom. They have become dependent on it. Dependent on a source of energy that I will scream out to the world in defiance against. I was a fool once, the same as they were. The same as many of us were. It was a time where we let our greed of magic overcome us. But I ask you, said Faust, speaking louder and louder. Why should our lives be dependent on something that was never even ours to begin with? As it ran out, we stole from another world where it was plentiful, but even then our greed wasn't satisfied. We stole it, something that could only have been a gift to us originally, and tried to take more and more. And so, today, I declare that we give the world we stole so much from back everything we took. All the magic in this world, we send it straight back to where it came from, to show we are not so weak as to depend on it. This battle won't be the end of it all. Faust looked all around him. The next step will be to adapt, but before we can even do that we must first win. We must cast off the shackles that bound us in fear of this power for so long and win back this world from the king. We must fight, even if our bodies begin to fall, and we must never give in. Who are we? Shivas. Who are we? Shivas. Who are we? Shivas. Faust smiled as he stepped back, hearing the loud cheers of the forces all around them. He looked at Kyokaku, nodding his head as if surrendering to her the right to do what was next. Kyokaku took the sign he gave her and stepped forward, holding a gun up to the sky. She pulled the trigger and a burst of light shot up from it, exploding into a firework up in the air. We fight. Take back our world. The war had begun. Protector of the fairies. Natsu spun to the side, his foot smashing into the soldier that had tried to sneak up on him. Another tried to hit him in his blind spot only for a large iron club to hit him in the face, Gajeel pivoting on his heel as he smashed his arm against a group of the soldiers. There's no end to these guys, shouted Natsu, punching another soldier of the royal city. According to the plan, this was stage 1 currently. They were drawing the forces of the city out to fight as they bombarded the shield around the city in cannon fire, testing its strength. The shield had appeared before they even got halfway to the city, blocking the first volley just in time. And all the others had yet to show any impact. It didn't look good right now in his eyes. How were they meant to get into the city if the barrier didn't even open? It couldn't be invincible, however. Soldiers constantly left the barrier through the gate, attempting to hold their forces back. It looked only one way, but the very fact that they sent out soldiers to take pressure off the barrier meant that it wasn't invincible. Only time would show if the barrier would weaken. In the corner of his eye he could see Wendy by Panther Lily's side, dodging some of the attacks launched at her while Panther Lily kept the rest away. The soldiers fighting seemed reluctant to attack her too, which lowered the risk she was in. It seems they weren't keep on hitting a child, even if the child could blast a whole group of them away in one shot. Miss Doggin hovered around her position too, jumping between fight after fight as he dealt with the soldiers with a mix of magic and simple hits with his staves. Taoshiro meanwhile would stay near them, slashing at anyone who got too close with a cold expression along his face. It seemed to make the soldiers a lot more likely to attack him than Wendy though, likely due to how little like a kid he seemed to be acting like. They better hurry up soon, said Gajeel. I don't want to be running low on magic while in the city. Natsu nodded, scanning the battlefield for the others from Daedalus. Faust was near the back if he remembered correctly, coordinating from Lacrima communicators to the different squad leaders. Ganju and Kyokaku were helping, but Kyokaku had looked quite restless herself and he was sure it would only be a matter of time before she jumped in to fight. Jidanba was a completely different matter though. He saw the man easily, the giant swiping through whole lines with a pair of axes. The man's shoulder armor seemed to have changed from last he saw him, now being bulkier. From what he had heard, that was so it could hold the serum he would use safely and allow him to activate it when needed. A large blast burst through the skies and Natsu narrowly avoided the blast, looking at the crater at where he had been standing. He stared towards the source, seeing a large cannon being aimed at him. He guessed he had been prioritized as a crucial threat from the look of it. Luckily the cannon seemed to take a while to recharge, so he just had to be aware of it. They wouldn't fire on him if he was caught up with their own soldiers too, or at least he hoped that was the case. Taking a deep breath, he let loose a breath attack, letting the flames swarm through the approaching forces and send them flying back. Gajeel did the same in the opposite direction, relieving the pressure on both of them in the process. Natsu took a few steps towards other opponents only for a blast of wind to send him flying away from them, landing by Mistogen's feet. Gajeel turned just in time to get the same treatment, managing to keep his footing as he landed before the two stared up at their attacker. Their attacker seemed to be a girl from what they could see, but Mistogen's reaction was enough to know she was a serious opponent. That's Senna, the holder of memories. Holder of memories. I don't know the details, but she got that nickname long ago. Be careful. She is the one Ichigo warned us about. They heard laughter, the source being the girl above them as she watched their efforts, floating on a gust of air as she did so. You're attempting to ruin my master's dreams. I can't let you do that. I suppose I'll have to set all of them loose to deal with you all. Senna raised a hand to the sky, the air above her ripping before a large crack appeared above her. She smiled as blanks slowly poured through the crack, descending down to the people below and slashing against them furiously. Natsu saw some of the blanks approaching him and took the initiative, swiping out with a large arc of flames that incinerating all of them. More blanks took their place instantly though, and Gajeel quickly rushed to lend a hand, launching a blast of iron spears at them. More came from behind only for a blast of energy to crash against them, courtesy of Mistogen's staves. We need to get in the barrier now, shouted Mistogen. Fighting her like this will drain us completely if we aren't careful. He dodged the swipe of another blank before destroying it quickly. These things will simply overwhelm us if we don't get away. Leave that to me. They heard Jidanbo's shout from all the way over where he was, obviously having listened to part of Mistogen's communication through the comms they had in place. Jidanbo rapidly grew in size, growing to the height of the wall before he smashed his fists against the barrier. Instead of breaking it, however, his fists bounced off, sending him off guard. A swarm of blanks attacked his ankles, making him fall down to his knees as his hands went to the ground to stop himself from falling. Just as he was forcing himself back to his feet, a massive blast of magic hit his back. Natsu staring in shock as all the cannons nearby Jidanbo all turned towards the giant, firing one after the other with as much magic as they could store in them. He heard Wendy cry out in worry, almost running towards Jidanbo to help him before she was grabbed by Gajeel to hold her back. Senna began smiling at the sight of the fallen giant before that smile vanished, Jidanbo still conscious and alive as he forced himself up. The armor around his shoulder seemed to crack before shattering, Jidanbo growing to greater heights till he matched the height of the tower all the way in the center of the city. Jidanbo closed his eyes, a voice ringing through his head as he remembered his last conversation with Faust. Faust slowly handed him a large container, a single serum casing held within. Only use this if you truly believe you need to. Only at the direst of circumstances. He had promised Faust back then, and if there was ever a dire situation then this was it. They needed to break through, and he would do so now. He stabbed forward, grunting in pain as the barrier tried to tear his hands apart. He kept up though, his fingers slowly passing through the barrier as he increased the strength behind them. Bringing his hands together inside it, he pulled them around the barrier's edge and slowly began forcing it to break, opening a gap. Do not underestimate Ashiba. With one final cry he created a massive rip in the barrier, one hand immediately dropping from the barrier to stretch towards where Natsu and the others were. Without warning he scooped them all up in his palm before he brought his arm straight back up, just in time to get it back through the hole before it snapped back shut. The barrier was too much this time however, and his body was already growing too weak. The barrier treated his arm as no more than a nuisance, slicing through the flesh and bone and causing his large arm to fall to the ground inside the barrier. Jidanbo saw the cries of his allies, shouting at him in worry, but he gave them a smile, bringing his remaining arm round to smash against a group of blanks. Come on! He shouted, his arm reaching out towards Senna. I'll take you on myself. How interesting, Senna muttered, dodging the giant's outstretched arm. This is new for you gatekeepers. I don't remember any of you being able to grow this tall. How much did you sacrifice for that? It matters not. Jidanbu's voice seemed to boom around the battlefield, his palm causing the ground to shake as it slammed into another cluster of blanks. I am the last of them, and as such I should at least give us something worthy to be remembered by. Senna dodged his wild swipe, aiming her staff at the giant before lunging forward with it. A large tornado of vicious wing swept towards Jidanbu, smashing against his chest and forcing him to fall back a step. Jidanbu held firm however, every step back he was forced to take only done as he took another 3 forward. Before Senna knew it, he was right in front of her, one of his swipes missing her only because of the large shield the blanks had made for her with their bodies. I will crush you, myself. Jidanbu fell to one knee, the combined fire power from the cannons along with Senna's strikes and the blanks finally catching up to him. He shakily reached out towards Senna, begging his arm to move just that bit faster before it was suddenly weighted down by a large group of blanks. Jidanbu felt his eyes growing heavy, looking up at Senna in defeat as his body collapsed to the floor and began shrinking back down in size. Senna appeared over him, a smirk on her face. Sorry, but we won't be losing today. She held the staff over her head, preparing to strike down at him to finish him off. Before she could however, the ground beneath her gave way, causing her strike to miss by millimeters. A blast caused her to jump back further, avoiding a cannon shot that almost hit her. I apologize Jidanbu, said Kyukaku, lifting the giant cannon over her shoulder. Yeah, said Ganju, cracking his knuckles. We're a bit late. Jidanbu smiled at them before seeing the mechanical form of the thing Faust had been working on before behind them. Are you in there, my king? I am, a voice said, called over some kind of speaker from within the machine. Jidanbu instantly recognized it as who he thought it had been. Faust. Rest well, my friend. You deserve it. I may do just that. Jidanbu's eyes slowly closed as they became too heavy to keep open any longer. Make it a wonderful world for me, will you? A world I would have loved to have seen. Being part of creating it will be all worth it then. I will, came Faust's voice, just as Jidanbu's eyes closed. And thank you for all you have done. We won't forget you, Jidanbu. Not for one moment. Protector of the fairies. Jidanbu. Calm down, Gajeel shouted, grabbing Mistogan's arm as he tried to rush away. Remember the plan. I can't abandon him like this. You have to. That's easy for you to say, you barely know him. Mistogan's mouth slammed shut as he realized what he had said, noticing how Gajeel's grip had slackened. I didn't mean dash. No, you're right. I barely know him. You do though. Now tell me, what would he have you do right now? I'd. Mistogan slowly began calming down, looking away from the barrier. He'd want us to continue with the plan. Exactly. Gajeel gave a look towards Natsu. You'll be okay, won't you, Salamander? I'll be fine, said Natsu with a large smile. You make sure to keep Wendy safe. I can take care of myself. Natsu patted Wendy on the back in a way she wasn't sure meant he was being patronizing or not. Sure you can. Natsu turned towards Happy, the Exceeds having flown after them just in time to get through the barrier before Jidanbu pushed them through. Ready, Happy? Aye. Wait. Natsu turned back to Mistogan slowly. I want us to do something first. The group stared as Mistogan stretched out his palm towards them all. Put your hands on top of mine. Why? Asked Toshiro. Do we have time for this? Just do it, Mistogan said seriously. It's an old tradition people did back in the day, from which world I've long forgotten. It is meant to bring luck though. You think an old chant will give us luck? What harm is there in humoring me? Toshiro sighed, placing his hand onto of Mistogan's. None, I suppose. I'm in, said Natsu, copying the action. Wendy did the same. The two looked at Gajeel before the man shrugged, placing his hand over theirs. Might as well. Will you allow me to join? Asked Panther Lily, placing his hand on the pile. Me too, said Happy, Carla copying him to not be left out. Mistogan nodded at them all, silently giving them his thanks. Now, we head towards the battlefield. Believe, and our blades will not break. Believe, and our hearts will not bend. Though the roads we take may be different, our iron hearts will beat as one. Swear, that even if the earth is torn asunder, we will live and return here once again. That sounds cheesy, muttered Toshiro. I see why it became an old tradition since I never heard that before. You know what, I don't care. Just make sure you all survive. Natsu gave a mock salute. We will. You do your job, we'll do ours. As one they split into their groups, charging off to their destinations. Happy took to the skies with Natsu and Fly to the furthest tower, Gajeel, and Wendy going to the second furthest with Panther Lily and Carla's help. That left Toshiro the nearest one while Mistogan rushed to the central one. As Natsu landed, the large sounds of drums appeared, a man flying down at him from a roof. Natsu dodged the strike to see the man who had tried to chase them earlier. Don Kanonji is here. For Gajeel and Wendy, they were forced to dodge a strike as they landed, a smartly dressed man walking up to them with a calm smile on his face, slowly closing the open book in his hands before discarding it to the side, holding a sword in his free hand. So you're the fools who broke in. Shuakura Tsukishima, your executor. At the last tower, Toshiro met the man he had seen in Treya that Natsu had fought. You're my copy. Sujiro Kyuzaka, Knight of the King. Toshiro Hitsugaya, student of your prisoner. Ah. Sujiro smiled. This will be a worthwhile battle then. Protector of the Fairies. In the cell below the tower, Kyan sat there, listening to the sounds he could hear outside and letting his senses feel the world around him. If there was any benefit to his power being sealed, it was this. The world seemed so clear all of a sudden, and he found himself capable of finding anyone in the city within moments if he looked hard enough. In the end it seemed his limited sensing in normal situations actually was the result of his own power. Having to see past his own released magic influenced his senses, but he hadn't thought it had been done this much. Or maybe it was that his sensing had always been above what he thought it had been and his magic had hidden that because it was so hard to sense through in the first place. He could feel the magic in the barrier surrounding the city. Ichigo had mentioned it to him, and he remembered how strong it was meant to be. He could sense a lot of smaller blasts of energy if he focused, only seeming to cause slight fluctuations in the shield. Jidanbo's presence suddenly exploded to the forefront of his mind. The man's power had gone beyond anything he had achieved in the training stages or with the early serum testing. What was happening out there? It wasn't much longer till multiple magical signatures appeared within the barrier, ones he remembered clearly. He tracked them as they all split off, looking like they were heading to the large sources of energy he could sense in the city. Perhaps the barrier's power source? It would be the wisest move to make. Mistogan, however, was heading towards him. Why was he heading here? Was he a fool too? Kyan scanned above him, feeling the presence of his brother still above. Mistogan wouldn't stand a chance. The man was a powerful S-class mage back home, and he knew the man could handle strong opponents, but his power came from stored energy. And he was heading to the man who had taken on an army with 6 others alongside him. No time, Kyan muttered, jumping to his feet. He tapped the bars lightly before sighing, reaching up to his face. His instant regeneration had failed him, and he bet Sonito would too, but he knew one part that still worked somehow. His mask. Swiping down, the bone-white mask appeared on his face. This was the strangest part. Despite his power being sealed, he had found himself being able to summon the mask. And he wasn't sure on why he was able to. In some ways, the mask felt different too. Like it wasn't part of his magic, and yet was at the same time. Doing what he did many times before, he placed his hands against the bars and focused. Sense the energy, grip it. No. Don't grip it, he had failed so many times before doing that. He didn't need to force the control. He just needed to be gentle. And then push. He slowly stepped forward, the bars shifting around him as he gently pushed past them. A click sound broke the silence as he unlocked the chains around his wrists, his magic slowly returning to him as his senses dulled once more. The feeling of the mask felt the same though, and it didn't seem to be draining his magic. If anything, it was delaying the drain. He looked down at his arm before swiping the mask away. It wasn't stopping the drain. It was drawing magic in to replenish it. He would have to be careful, else he'd get the same thing Jura warned him about before. First things first. He slowly walked to the stairs, heading up them as fast as he dared to. He needed an old friend back first of all. He needed Zanjitsu. All he'd have to do would be to rip it out of the king's arms. Protector of the Fairies. Check the description for the links to the author.